Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It's a monster show today, Sam. QB rankings. That's why you're all here. Sam's QB rankings. My QB rankings. We'll do our mug check at the top. We'll talk a little bit about what? It's not a mug. It's a Gatorade bottle.
It's not a mug.
You're drinking Gatorade this morning.
Yeah, 0. So it's cool.
0. So you have no sugar. Yeah. I'm sure all those other ingredients that replace the sugar are perfectly good for you. Anyway, we could use a Gatorade sponsorship too, so I won't. I'm sure it's wonderful. We also have little news from last night, Russell Wilson and Stefon Diggs. We're going to get all into it. How you doing this morning, Sam?
Doing good. How are you, Steven?
I'm wonderful. Let's get into all the stuff. So you and I are going to do our QB rankings 1 through 10. But first, got to talk about last night. Stefon Diggs signs with the New England Patriots. Russell Wilson signs with the New York Giants. We already reacted instantly to this on the YouTube channel, but we know some people are audio listeners only. We also know that there's some crossover from audio and YouTube. So we encourage, if you're just an audio person, get to YouTube as well. You get extra. You get a little extra exclusives. You get the instant reaction. So if you're an audio only listener, we encourage you to get to the YouTube channel, check the mic, and subscribe there as well. But let's try to sum it up. Russell Wilson to the Giants. What was your quick reaction on Russ signing with New York?
I mean, the Russell Wilson thing is interesting because you can read it a bunch of different ways, right? You can either read it that maybe they don't think they can get a quarterback, right? They've made the calls, the trade offers are not being listened to. They think the QBs are going to go 1-2. Cam Ward 1 to Tennessee, Shedeur Sanders number 2 to Cleveland, and the Giants will be sitting there with no quarterback available at 3 unless they want to do something crazy and draft Jackson Dart 3rd overall, which we have seen in mock drafts, but I would imagine they don't want to do. So you could read it like that and say, look, this is just guaranteeing them a quarterback that they're comfortable with starting going into the season, and they'll come back for a quarterback later on, or they'll just punt entirely till next year. Remember, the Jameis Winston contract, like this is slightly weird because Jameis was already there. But Jameis's deal is like 2 years, $8 million. It's like bad backup, buddy. Jameis Winston is number 2 on that depth chart, come what may. So the Russell Wilson deal is a bridge starting quarterback contract. It's up to $21 million, but functionally $10.5 million. Last year, Sam Darnold was 1 year, $10 million as a true bridge quarterback for the Vikings. So it's bridge quarterback money. So the initial reaction was like, wow, that's a crazy. You've got sort of 2 starting-ish quarterbacks in Russell and Jameis. But when you look at the money, it's like you've got 1 bridge deal, you've got 1 backup deal, you've got Cutlets on literally no guaranteed money whatsoever. He's just happy to be in the building. And it doesn't actually keep you out of the quarterback market. I think it's a good hedge, but I don't know that it necessarily means they wouldn't draft Shedeur Sanders at number 3 if he's available to them.
Yeah, my initial read on it was it's either they don't like Shedeur, don't want him, and they're going to go Russ and Jameis, or they have good information that the Browns are going to take him at 2. So I'm more saying this is certainly diminishing the possibility that the Giants take Shedeur Sanders at 3, and then we debate, as we did last night for about 25 minutes. Does this mean the Browns are taking Shedeur Sanders at 2, and the Giants are like, man, we are left out of the musical chairs here. Maybe we'll draft a developmental guy later. We'll talk about all those players and who those should be. But they're not getting Shedeur Sanders. Or are the Giants saying, we don't want Shedeur? Maybe the Browns also don't want him. And now we need to talk about the next group of teams that could take Shedeur Sanders, get them into their room. The Jets, the Saints. I've been bringing up the Colts, which apparently Colts fans get super triggered about. They don't even want to play in this world. They don't even think it's a possibility based off the reactions I've been getting on Twitter for bringing it up, even though they clearly have no faith in Anthony Richardson and they brought in Daniel Jones for competition for 1 year. Why wouldn't they? If they love the quarterback, why wouldn't they at least, play in that market instead of just getting another player at 14? So I think there's some other teams that are very much in the mix for Shedeur Sanders if he falls beyond 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting teams. And as we talked about last night, like if he does start to fall, it opens up a whole world of trade possibilities of teams that could potentially trade up to get him, including, by the way, Cleveland. Like if Cleveland passed on him at 2, and the Giants pass on him at 3, like that doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't come back for him
Right.
lower in the first round, right? They might go, well, we can't pass up Abdul Carter or we can't pass up Travis Hunter. Those are the special, blue chip players that have elite talent. They're just too good to pass up. You never pass on those guys. And we don't think that the quarterback is good enough to make us do that. But then it starts to go, well, if he's available in the 20s in the first round, how much does it cost to get back up and get him? And is it worth it now, given that we already have Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter secured? Then I think, those things start to get on the table.
The other takeaway that I had, especially, I mean, the 1 year of insight that we got from the Hard Knocks episodes of the Giants last year, knowing John Mara, as we know him through the television, and how much he wanted Saquon Barkley and a face of the franchise, and was as much hurt by him leaving just for that reason. Good citizen, face of the franchise type, even though he's a running back, what have you. I have a feeling he's saying, I want Travis Hunter. And that might be more important to him than the actual quarterback situation, than getting the next franchise quarterback. Knowing what we know about him, that Travis Hunter is the guy. And I think this opens the door for Travis Hunter at 3 for the Giants. If they're not going to go QB, that they could go that route. Because I think if the Browns were taking a non-quarterback, their most likely choice is Abdul Carter. I'm not saying that's set in stone, but I think that's their most likely choice. That would put Travis Hunter to the Giants. And I think that also, it wasn't like a domino necessarily, but I do believe the Stefon Diggs to the Patriots move impacts this a little bit, where New England's saying, okay, we're probably not getting Travis Hunter. We need to get some kind of playmaker in the building for Drake May, and they go Stefon Diggs and sign him last night.
I mean, I think it was more Mara's his nephew that's got some executive position within that front office. Like, I think it was more him that was sort of genuinely concerned about, like, what's the team's identity if we don't even have Saquon Barkley. Mara was more just bummed that, Saquon's a great player and a great guy, and if he goes to the Eagles, I'll be sad, and all those kinds of things. Like, I don't know if he is that focused on, face of the franchise, identity, all that kind of thing. Somebody definitely is within the building, but I'm not sure that it's John Mara specifically.
I also don't think, I mean, again, if they don't think Shedur's the great long-term answer, and we'll talk about whether or not he is in just a little bit here. If they don't think he's the guy, that's fine. I mean, go ahead, do the bridge quarterback thing. I don't think they're competing this year, the Giants. I think they're still a couple years away, and that's not great for Joe Shane sitting here in year 4. Right. I think they're moving in the right direction, but I don't think they're competing in the East with the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Cowboys. I just don't think that's the case. So thinking long-term for the Giants is probably the right play, going with the double bridge quarterback of Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston.
Except that I think the decision-making has to factor in. I mean, it shouldn't from a pure team building perspective, but like, there's no way they're not aware acutely within that building that this is probably the last year they have, unless they do something to change that picture, right? The something to change the picture is either they're better this year than they're expected to be, or they draft a quarterback where that's the future, right? Like, I think you can sell the ownership on the idea of, hey, yeah, I know we sucked this year, but it's because we had a young quarterback, year 1, rookie struggles, blah, blah, blah. Next year is when we're going to cook. You can't do that if you just did the bridge quarterback thing and that didn't work out and you still don't have the quarterback. Well, then just everyone's getting fired. So even if it's the sound strategy for like the future, I think Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, like half the decision makers in that room are at least subconsciously, if not overtly, factoring in the idea that if we're not doing something significant, we're getting fired at the end of this year.
So anyway, good discussion last night. It's over on the YouTube channel, the whole thing. Again, I think the biggest fallout here is probably no Shedur at 3 to the Giants. Maybe the Browns take him. Maybe he falls. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Patriots, I think, are more likely to – they're either sitting there and they'll have a chance at Abdul Carter. If Shedur goes and then Travis Hunter goes, they might have a shot at Abdul Carter, or they're going to be debating Will Campbell, who, by the way, has a big arm length measurement coming up today. He could be over 33. He could be a tackle again by the end of the day. By the time you listen to this, Will Campbell could be a tackle once again. So stay tuned. LSU Pro Day is today.
It's been a weird year for the measurement stuff because the combine measurements were consistently off relative to the Senior Bowl measurements,
They
which,
were.
they do the same things, right? So there have been previous years where like all the 40 times felt weird. Like the first year where they had a new, it wasn't Charlie Casserly. The first year they had like a new unofficial timing guy. It was like a 10th off every single time relative to the official one that got kind of squared away. But this appears to be a strange year in terms of measurements. So it's entirely possible that Will Campbell's arm length ends up actually crossing the magic threshold where people see him as a tackle again. Now, I can't see him getting there from a wingspan point of view because he's so far off. Like he would be literally the smallest wingspan of a tackle in the NFL on record. So I can't, even with questionable measurements, I can't see LSU getting him to like middle of the pack in terms of wingspan, but he genuinely might end up crossing that magic arm length threshold thing, which would be wild in terms of where the discourse goes from there.
It's important, man. You can stretch out the arm in the last few weeks. It's all about your scapula too, right? When they're grabbing, when you're doing the vertical, you want to retract your scapula so your reach doesn't look as far, and then you loosen up the scapula when they're doing the arm. There's all sorts of tricks to this. So hopefully Will Campbell learned those tricks, and all of a sudden he's back in play at 4 if there's a 33 next to his name by the end of the day here.
The dude's just been hanging from a pull-up bar for the last 2 weeks.
Forget training. Forget any training. We just need to get this arm length in a good spot.
What do you make of the Stefon Diggs signing? Because that was the other big bit of news.
Oh yeah, we didn't really touch on it too much. I mean, look, we mentioned last night he kind of ran himself out of multiple places. Texans only wanted 1 year of him. I think given the situation that the Patriots have and the desperation, I think he could still play. Like, I don't think he's as good as he was in 2020, 2021. I think he's still good. He's coming off the ACL. They had a plethora of extra money that's not going to be spent. Like, there's nowhere else to spend this money right now, either this year or next year. And it's essentially a 1-year deal for 23 or whatever million it is. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a fine move for New England to at least get somebody in the building, at least for 1 year to help Drake May's development. And it frees them up a little bit now at 4. If they don't get a Travis Hunter, maybe they take a tackle, they take best player available, still have to figure out the left tackle situation, but this at least ticks one box of, hey, we have a receiver who's capable of getting open and helping Drake May.
Yeah, it feels nasty, but I don't know that they had anything that they could do that wouldn't feel nasty. Like they have this acute need at wide receiver. They desperately need to upgrade. They didn't get Chris Godwin over the line. He went back for apparently less money to Tampa Bay. So at that point, there's like, where could they go where the move would you be coming out of it going, that's a great move. Love it. Everything about this fantastic. So it feels like an overpay. But I don't like everything would have felt bad for them. The real question I have is, I mean, I feel like it's too much money. I don't understand who they were bidding against to make this happen. But the big thing to me is like Diggs has got some fairly extensive, I don't know what the best way of terming them, like attitude, character concerns. Like he's orchestrated his exit from Minnesota. The Vikings locker room didn't seem to love the guy that much. He orchestrated his way out of Buffalo. There doesn't seem to be much love lost there between the two parties. And Houston specifically went out of their way to make sure that he would only be in that building for 1 year maximum, right? And I know like he was named a team captain right off the bat. That's meaningless to me, right? That could just be they feel like that's the best way of keeping him happy for a year. That doesn't mean he's the best leader they have after 3 weeks. So I find it interesting that that's a guy you want to put next to your young quarterback who's still in a formative NFL phase. That's my only point.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to lean toward the high risk, high reward type of. I guess I'm back and forth on it, but you have to acknowledge, right? These are high risk, high reward types of plays, right? So it could blow up in their face, but I always think of, okay, given the circumstances, given the constraints, and what's left on the receiver market, what's left to even spend money on, like where else are they going to throw $20 million for this year? Nowhere. They have $80 million in effective cap space still. So I don't think money is a massive issue. It's not going to hamstring them going forward. And they had no other options. They have to take a chance, right? None of these decisions are 100% like, oh, we feel great. This is 100% certain, but it was probably a necessary deal to at least have somebody who's good at playing football playing receiver for the Patriots.
Yeah, so that's the one quibble you would say, right? If they were willing to overspend massively to make this happen, and they have that kind of desperate need, like, could they not have found a way of getting something more significant over the line? Like, they have a lot of draft picks. Forget number 4 overall. Like, they have a high second round pick as well. Like, could they have thrown the kind of offer at Cincinnati that would have gotten them T. Higgins? I don't know, but you'd have felt good about that, right? If they had sent a package that involved the second round pick and paid T. Higgins the big money, like, that would have been a signal of intent and the kind of, not even overpay, but the kind of big spend that would make a ton of sense. But like, let's just overpay for Stefon Diggs because he might be the best bad option we have available. Just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and I think they tried all those things, and this is partly, hey, last week Cincinnati, they locked up T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. They got those deals done, so every option seems to be off the table for New England, and they had to go this route for Stefon Diggs. Your point's a fair one, though, which is, hey, who are they bidding against, right? They're the only team really looking at Stefon Diggs, but yeah, he's also probably the best option at this point. He's still not, like, he's 4 or 5 years younger than DeAndre Hopkins. He's not at this fall off a cliff age at receiver. He is coming off the ACL. That's legitimate. Hasn't looked as good the last couple of years, but best available option at the moment.
And that's the thing. Like, whatever he was last year in terms of the level he was at, he's now a 31-year-old wide receiver who's clearly declined from his best already, coming off an ACL. Like, that's not insignificant. I mean, that's a major factor in determining what he's going to be next year, the year after, et cetera. So, like, it's no slam dunk that he's going to make a major impact for this team.
All right, man. Anything else on the last two? Like I said, I think we had even more in-depth discussion right here on the YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out. Posted it last night, somewhat instantly. Quick reaction last night to both Russ and Stefon Diggs and the draft fallout. I think, which again, I think is the biggest story from last night. How it really impacts the draft and the top 4 picks in particular. Good there.
Yeah.
All right. Before we unveil our QB rankings, can we have a quick discussion on QB evaluations, draft evaluations, and I mean, I've got some thoughts on learnings through the years, how I thought data would help inform these decisions, and then the point that I always make where it's difficult to find the next elite high-end quarterback. It's just a very difficult, it's a low percentage proposition. Can we have a quick discussion about this?
Okay.
I didn't tell you about this. Anyway, I just want to preface everything by, I think data, we have 10 years of PFF data in college, which I think is really useful in the entire draft process. As people know our history with PFF, I thought that there would be a point where PFF data, having data on all the college quarterbacks would make this process better, more informed, that the hit rates would go up if people stuck to that, to the data a little bit more. And hasn't been the case. I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's anything in there data-wise that you can model up and, lump all together that's going to give you all the best outcomes. And I say this, I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's good to just kind of preface all of this before the QB discussion. First off, the hit rate thing on quarterbacks, the standard's higher than every other position, right? We don't want just a starter. Any other position, if you get a starter, you can call that a win. If you have a guy that just plays football, you can call that a win. Doesn't work that way at quarterback. Guys who just start. Marcus Mariota was a starter. Jameis Winston was a starter. But they're misses in this category of, did you get what you wanted? Did you get the second contract? Did you become the elite guy? There's like 8 of these guys over the last 10 years that have come into the NFL. And there's certainly no data points that would have pointed to all of them. And there's no scout that would have pointed to all of them. Say that a lot, but I would love to see the person that had Mahomes, Deshaun Watson at the time, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, would have had Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, Jaden Daniels, would have just nailed all of them, right? Those are all my top guys, right? Some guys hit here and they miss there, The same guys that had Mahomes number 1 also had Deshaun Kaiser number 1. Like, it doesn't work this way. Nobody has all of it. So I just want to preface it by all of that. Any thoughts on that, or do you want to add anything to that before we get into the rankings?
I was watching Greg Cosell yesterday talking about some quarterbacks, and I thought he summed it up pretty well because So we'll get into this in a minute, but one of the things you're comparing is like physical tools, right? Traits versus kind of the more mental side of things, right? And a lot of people tend to gravitate towards the NFL physical tools. Who's got the big arm, the physicality, the size, the athleticism, all those kinds of things. And then because that guy has more potential, right? It's an easy line to draw that the things you can see much more readily equals higher potential. And then it was on Ross Tucker's podcast, and Ross said, well, hang on a second. If I told you, at the time they were being drafted, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, don't those guys all fall into the bucket of like their physical tools are fine, but they're like, pocket passers who are not going to create on the run, who don't have amazing arms, who blah, and Greg Cosell was like, well, yeah, and that's why this is hard. Like, you can't just point me to the traits, guys. Like arguably the three greatest quarterbacks of their generation and of, three of the top 10 of all time fit the kind of other bucket, the bucket that's harder to discern and harder to find, and harder to predict. So it has remained a crapshoot. I think it will always remain a crapshoot. I think the closest people are going to get to figuring out how to predict quarterbacks is some of the mental stuff that we've touched on before, like the S2 testing type of stuff, right? The things that actually let you get inside how their brain operates and, plotting out, instant reaction, quick thinking on the fly. But even, you hear Tom Brady talk about his time playing the game where he's talking about the Bucks versus the Chiefs Super Bowl. And he's like, I knew their defense better than they knew their defense. Right. And like, that's the stuff that's hard to quantify. Like, anyone can cram for a test but like, can you actually figure out which guy is going to have like a pretty solid level of homework and which guy is going to be utterly maniacal when it comes to homework, to the point where the thing is instinctive in his brain, the way it was with Brady and Manning? I don't know that you can ever tell the difference.
And even then, right, which you're absolutely right, Sam, right? Because this is how my brain works. Find me the couple data points that work. And that's a good data point. Like, oh, Tom Brady's the GOAT, and here's how he was wired. Let's find people like that. So before his draft year, who was supposedly wired like that? Do you remember? Davis Webb was wired like that. You can't even get Davis Webb out of the film room. And he's 6'5" with a cannon.
And that's why he's now a coach.
He's a coach, but like he's got some of the worst accuracy I've ever seen. Right. But if your brain says, find me the previous examples and let me find similar previous examples, Davis Webb was like the guy. Oh, you got to take a mid-round flyer on Davis Webb. He's a film junkie. He's got some accuracy issues, but he's got tools and he loves the film room. And the guy lasted a few years and now he's a coach. So yeah, it is very, very difficult to find the high-end quarterbacks. And once again, to repeat, the standard is higher. We're all looking for top 8 to 10 quarterbacks. As soon as a quarterback falls into like he's middle tier, he's Derek Carr, your team's saying, oh, when do we move on from this guy? We're capped with Derek Carr. Derek Carr's a hit, man. Like, that guy's played 10 years, started in the NFL. He's a, quote, hit. He's a high-end player at any other position, and he's the guy that you don't want on your team. So the standards at quarterback are just so much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point is neither one of these lists will be correct. Neither will any other quarterback list you see this pre-draft period, right? There will be no correct draft order where everybody has the exact order of all these quarterbacks right. And then the other thing is, I sent that tweet chain the other day where it was like Jimmy Johnson used to just basically draw up a list of guys that he liked and draft off vibes. And somebody was like, did that work?
I think you misread that. You've misread that when you think people that he likes. It's just like his best evaluations in each draft. And
I'm not misreading it. That may be misrepresenting what he did. The point being, like, we might overall be overthinking this when it comes to court. All this like data and evidence and physical traits and tools and interviews and everything that goes into this quarterback bucket thrown into a thing and rolled around, the strike rate is still horrendous. You might actually be just as well watching 5 minutes of tape on a guy and just picking the guys you like at quarterback and rolling with it that way. That's how bad the strike rate is on any of this stuff. And with that said, let's get into our quarterback rankings.
All right, you ready to go? All right, so you and I both went off on our own, created our own QB rankings. I've heard rumors they could be similar, but we'll see what
Yeah.
happens here. But we did this on our own. We'll come back. We'll come up with our own list. By the way, we're going to do this for wide receivers tomorrow. And JT, shout out to QB school. JT's in here. He's trying to see. He wants, he's trying to steal some information here. JT. He wants to know what we think. All right, get to your rank. Who's your number one quarterback?
It's Cam Ward. I thought about. I genuinely think that it's closer than most people do. Like, this is the chalkiest quarterback ranking season I can remember. Pretty much everybody seems to have exactly the same order. The debate is like where the gaps are, like how big the gap is between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3. I genuinely think it's closer between Cam Ward and Shedeur than most people do. And I thought about briefly sticking with my kind of initial instinct and saying, maybe let's keep Shedeur number one. But no, I think Cam Ward is that guy. I think there's obviously the physical tools are better, right? He's got a better arm. He's more mobile, athletic, however you want to term that. Just easy velocity, like all those kind of traits are there. And he does make special throws. He doesn't have as much of the thing that Shedeur is really bad at. Ward is not as bad at. And it's just like, how concerned are you at the what the hell plays that he has?
Yeah, Cam Ward's my number one as well, by the way. So let's dig into what's actually happening with Cam Ward. We saw he came through Incarnate Word, then Washington State, and then to Miami. And look, last year was by far his best season. Coming into the year, when you watched him at Washington State, you saw, I'll talk about his turnover worthy play rate in a minute. It's incredibly consistent in the threes. And it's a high number for college, right? It's a 3.5, 3.7, 3.4. And those types of numbers at the NFL level for turnover worthy plays, you're like middle of the pack at the NFL level. And so that's probably potentially worse, when you project Cam Ward at the next level. So I think it's interesting, by the way, that the Titans are probably going to draft him. And we made a big deal of the Will Levis, what you call the meme plays. Cam Ward has some bad plays. There's going to be a little PTSD in the building when they watch a couple of these Cam Ward plays. The difference will be, can he offset them with some of the great plays that he's able to pull out?
I think there's a fine line in that whole world, right? Like, there's a fine line between genius and idiocy when it comes to decision-making at the quarterback position. And like I tweeted out one of them, but Cam Ward treads a very fine line between like those magic improv plays that, great quarterbacks can do and the what the fuck meme plays that Will Levis has, right? Like, there's one play in particular, he was wrapped up, he's in trouble, and he like just about frees his arms and then pitches the ball out to a tight end who then rumbles like 20, 30 yards and makes a big play. But like, that's not a million, like that's a fraction away, or the arm from the pass rusher getting in at the wrong time. Like, that's a hair's breadth away from a Will Levis meme play where you're like, what are you doing? You can't do that. Right. And the question is like, is he going to be consistently on the right side of that line, or does he do enough? Like, the other thing is, even if you're not, do you just make enough positive plays that you offset the terrible plays? And that was really like the meme plays for Levis were what took him down effectively. But honestly, the worst part was that he didn't offset them with enough big plays. Like, if he only had like one of those a week, right? But if you had a bunch of big plays on the other side of the ledger, the way Josh Allen did earlier in his career, you'd have a lot more people saying, let's stick with him. He can get by those. He's making big plays. The problem is he didn't have the positive. And it was just like every week there's one joke play to be like, come on, this guy can't start.
Here's what I feel is different with Cam Ward versus, say, Will Levis. I think there's a part of Levis's game where that's like how he's wired, right? He gets into the game. If it's a first read, second read, he's okay. Once things go a little haywire within a play, maybe he short circuits a little bit. I think Cam, it's more of the hero ball discussion, right? He's trying to do too much. And if you just take his plays in isolation, put him next to some bad Levis plays, you'll say, okay, these are similar. Every time Cam Ward made these plays, though, cross-body interception against Florida in week 1, cross-body horrible pick 6 against Cal in the biggest game of the year to that point. Miami still undefeated. Every time he made one of those plays, he bounced back from that. And so I always use the phrase amnesia. I stole that from a pitching coach that I had. He said every pitcher needs to have, a few things, and one of them's amnesia, right? The ability to forget what happened, forget your bad pitches, forget your bad plays if you're a quarterback. I think Cam has that. And you said, hey, this only happens once a week. I mean, Virginia Tech, maybe it happened 3 times, but there was at least one in a lot of the big games for Cam Ward. And almost every single time he was able to bounce back and offset that with the arm talent that he has. We're seeing him throw the ball 60 yards and hit areas of the field that just shouldn't be touched, right? Where defenders don't even expect to be defending. I think when you watch all of these quarterbacks in succession, and I actually I made it a point to not watch Cam Ward first, because I think a lot of times in our brain, you kind of like watch players in the perceived order, and then your brain almost like works in that same order. So I tried to watch Cam Ward after I watched everyone else. There's so many QBs in this class who don't have great arms. And when you watch Cam Ward after those guys, you're like, okay, that ball comes out different. That ball flies out of his hand, both down the field and, he was just ripping seam routes left and right. So look, I think he is a boomer bust type of prospect. And as I preface this entire show with every quarterback's boomer bust, but I think he has the ability to create special plays inside the pocket, outside the pocket, certainly has the ability to make those hero ball plays that you just want to eliminate from his game. But you mentioned, how much do you do that, right? How much do you try to rein him in? He's one of those guys you say, how much do I try to rein him in? Will I lose some of the natural playmaking, or do I just have to deal with that? But I don't worry about how he's mentally wired, maybe like from what we've seen with Will Levis. I think Cam Ward has elevated each of the programs he's been at. He elevated Miami, made them a playoff contender, even though they lost down the stretch. And I think that means something as well.
Yeah, and I do. So because so much of his kind of scouting report, if you like, is going to be focused on, the arm, the physical tools, all those kinds of things, which are good. Like, I think those are definitely worth bringing up. The arm is different to a lot of these other guys, like just easy velocity. He's able to fire the ball and absolutely rip, frozen ropes on various targets. I think his athleticism is really good, but he's not in the Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels stratosphere. He's in, like, to me, his athleticism worked more in the kind of prime Russell Wilson era, right? A stockier guy who's fast, but probably not going to be like a huge part of your team's design run game, but is really good at extending plays. Like, he's fast enough to get away from guys. He's strong enough to fend them off as well. Like, there are plays where he stiff arms a pass rusher, buys himself another couple of seconds. Like, he's really good at that kind of stuff. But because so much of the focus is on that, I don't think he gets enough credit actually for the more cerebral quarterbacking parts of it. And because maybe one of his biggest negatives is the meme play, tightrope that he's walking sometimes. But I actually think, like, he makes quick decisions. There's very little lag time between him seeing it, letting the ball fly, or taking off. Once he decides something, there's zero hesitation there. He's just, I'm gone. He, most of the time when he sort of takes off moving, and when he starts to lean on his athleticism, he's doing so to find a pass, as opposed to, as soon as there are quarterbacks where as soon as they have to start moving, they're looking to run. Like, they're taking off and they're getting 3 yards if 3 yards is what's available. He's looking to buy time most of the time. And then if he has to scramble, he'll scramble, but he's not looking to run first and foremost. I think that's a positive thing, for his quarterbacking ability as well. So I think, like, he's got some real positive traits just from a mental processing standpoint as well.
The other thing I wanted to say too, because I agree, I think he navigates when he navigates the pocket to run, it's decisive, and he does a good job with that. I think he's absolutely looking to throw. I was watching the Louisville game live, and he rolls to his left, and I thought he was throwing one away, because it was like from the 35 yard line. Looked like he was throwing it away, puts an absolute strike in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. I mean, he can make special plays. And part of the reason why I tried to preface a lot of the history of QB evaluation and everything is we went through a stretch where the toolsy quarterbacks did not hit whatsoever. The guys with accuracy issues, the guys that just had big arms and some athleticism, none of them hit until they started to hit. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. And so Ward, I think, has to be one in this class because of this perceived ceiling. And you could go back to what the great Greg Cosell said. And you would say, Tom Brady doesn't have high ceiling. Drew Brees doesn't have high ceiling. Brock Purdy doesn't have a high ceiling, but they certainly reached their potential. And Purdy looks like he's on his way, and they're not toolsy guys. But I think Cam Ward can do special stuff, right? And I think of all the quarterbacks in this class, he could do that the best. He improved his sack rate. That's the one other thing I wanted to highlight. Improved his sack rate last year. He has gotten a little bit better each year as well, I believe, all the way through the progression. And I don't love the way he's not great with his just pure footwork. I'm sure JT's maybe got some footwork questions. He's drifting. He's not, it's not exactly by the book, but I think a lot of that's just his feel and playmaking too. I think he also knows when to maneuver, when to drift and create space to make those throws. And a lot of that works in his favor. So the one other point I wanted to highlight, and I think it's would you call Cam, I would consider Cam Ward kind of a 1-year wonder. And I put that in, are you a 1-year starter who is elite, or did you only have one great year? I would say Cam Ward is in that bucket. And over the last 10 years or so, we have examples of those guys going both ways, right? Kyler Murray had 1 year as a starter. Joe Burrow had 2 years as a starter, but one was elite. Mitch Trubisky had 1 year as a starter, which was excellent. Dwayne Haskins had 1 year as a starter. And Mac Jones are and then you could say Jaden Daniels, who was a 5-year starter, but the fifth one was just out of this world different, right? And so this is why I say there's no data that says this is a positive or this is a negative, because 3 out of those 5 looked great, and 2 weren't, or 3 out of 6, whatever it is. So I don't think that's telling either way. But you could say he's either trending in the right direction, or why he only did it in 1 year when he had the best talent around him at Miami. I don't think it matters either way, but I think it's just interesting looking back at the history of players that I would consider 1-year wonders at the position.
It's also, it depends. You need to measure those things the correct way, right? Like if you looked at certain data points, they would say every year he started looked good, right? Touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, that was the people that are like Aaron Rodgers had a really good year last year. Actually, quietly, you guys all just missed it. Like touchdown to interception ratio is the thing that they're using to say, actually, his numbers are really good last year. You guys, I don't know what you were watching, right? Cam Ward's touchdown interception ratio for his career, like every single year was good, right? But but if you're watching the tape in those years, they weren't as good as those data points. So if you can definitely look at certain data points and say it's a 1-year wonder, effectively, like one elite year, the rest of them were varying degrees of solid, but not spectacular. But if you were looking at certain data points, you'd be like, every year he started, he was good.
Anything else from you on Cam Ward before we move on to QB2?
Yeah, the negatives that I had on him a little bit. Number one, we've already talked about that kind of fine line between improv success and, disastrous plays. This is another one of those things where it's like the balance can go either way. He is stylistically like he's a big game hunter. He is looking for huge plays, and sometimes that's at the exclusion of open underneath plays where that idea of you'll never go broke if you just keep picking up profit, right? Well, he eschews profit all the time, looking for, like, he's like a VC. He's searching for the thing that's going to want 100x his money. He's turning down the small simple profit, and he's searching for the thing that's going to catapult him to the moon. So I question sometimes some of his turn downs. They're decisive, don't get me wrong. Like once he decides he's throwing something, he's throwing it, and there's no hesitation, but they do feel like wrong reads on the play a lot of the time. And again, explosives are the thing everyone's trying to make happen in the NFL. So on the one hand, you can look at that and say, that's a good thing, right? He's aiming at the most productive, the most explosive, the most valuable plays. But I do wonder if he strays too far in that direction instead of just taking the open play sometimes.
That was a Caleb Williams point for me. The big play hunting and just kind of like waiting. And again, part of that scheme, part of that's style. But yeah, I definitely saw that in Caleb Williams last year as well.
And then the only other thing I feel like his accuracy in terms of like ball location is it's middle of the pack. Like it's okay. It's not a problem. I'm not saying like he's an inaccurate quarterback, but I don't think it's a strength.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of how I described Josh Allen coming out before, he became a superstar. But I described him as having those seasons with the high yards per attempt. Maybe the interceptions are high, but the touchdowns are high as well. I think Cam Ward can have those high end seasons, but he could also have those seasons where maybe the turnovers end up coming back to bite, and it's just volatile. I think there's volatility to Cam Ward's game. The last question I wanted to answer: where does he rank compared to last year's quarterbacks? Because I've seen this all over the place as well. Personally, I wouldn't put him above Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May as a prospect. And now it's tough in hindsight, but Michael Penix looked pretty good. Bo Nix looked pretty good. And we don't know what J.J. McCarthy would have been. I mean, there's a realistic case that he, once we have the information, would be the 7th best quarterback of the last 2 draft classes. But as a prospect, I don't think he's higher than 4 behind Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, who went 1, 2, 3 last year.
I do think it's tough because of the hindsight thing and the way that your kind of bias is going to be slanted with more information. And neither one of us grades these guys in terms of like a scouting numerical grade, right? A 7.2 or whatever. So we can't, we're not coming at this with a number that we've based it. But I felt all the way along that Shedeur Sanders belonged in the conversation with last year's quarterbacks, right? I agree. I would have him below Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, but I think he belongs in that tier with the next group, right? The J.J. McCarthys, the Bo Nixes, and the Michael Penix of the world, bearing in mind that at least 2 of those guys were seen as low-end first-round guys, maybe top end of the second round. I feel like they belong in that group, both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think that's where they sit relative to last year's guys, not at the very, very top end, where those guys were special type prospects, but in the next group.
Yeah, the next group where they all have some. I liked May more. I mean, we were surprised, I think, at how much negativity there was around Drake May, but I thought he was in the top tier of last year, and certainly of the last 2 years. I would still put May there, cut off there, and then there's a lot of buts. J.J. McCarthy, how often did he carry an offense? Michael Penix Jr.'s injuries. Bo Nix, is he great or just serviceable? Cam Ward has different types of questions, but similar level of questions, I would say. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good on Cam Ward. My last point on Cam Ward. Just hearing him talk a little bit, he's got a little bit of that go ahead and doubt me that shows up, like a Geno Smith, like a Baker Mayfield. Just saying. When you hear enough of that, Top Golf, he would win Top Golf. He passed the Top Golf test, I think. If we get, I don't know if the Titans are doing that, if they're bringing in the Top Golf, setup, but I think Cam Ward wins Top Golf.
The Top Golf test would be fascinating this year, given the various personalities.
All right, man. That's our Cam Ward discussion. We're on pace for a 12-hour show. I don't care if we're here for 12 hours. We're breaking down QBs. We're having fun. And we're on to QB2. Who is your number 2 QB 2025 NFL Draft?
My QB2 is Shedeur Sanders, Colorado.
Same. All right. Shedeur. You've been a Shedeur guy this entire time, Sam.
Yeah. It feels like he's polarizing, and yet I don't think he actually is. Every time you sort of mention his name, there are people either on Twitter or in the chat or whatever, the guy's, he's like a 2nd, 3rd round guy. He's undraftable. He's there's always hyperbole surrounding him, and yet everyone seems to basically come down to the idea that he's QB2 in this draft. That's pretty much the consensus rank. Again, the consensus big board has him slapped firmly like QB2, top 10 player, isn't moving. The kind of narrative and the hype and the bullshit doesn't seem to actually match what people put him as when they put their money to it.
You want to have a fun game? I know some people are watching this in it as its own scouting report on Shedeur Sanders, but we're doing this live. Put into the chat. We already have people put into the chat what you believe about Shedeur Sanders. We have, QB from QB1 to undraftable. There is no wider range. It is an emotional response to Shedeur Sanders, in part because of what you see from him in the media, his dad, whatever you want. There's an emotional response to Shedeur and his evaluations.
Throw in your one-line scouting report on Shedeur Sanders.
One line, undraftable, QB1, round 2. We got it all.
So
what do you see in his game, though? What have we seen from Shedeur?
To me, he's a very interesting prospect because I feel like he gets unfairly maligned because of how he compares to Cam Ward. So Cam Ward has the obvious physical traits and advantage over Shador basically everywhere. He's got a bigger arm. He's more athletic. He's heavier, like he's a stockier build. He just looks, he's got more of those NFL physical traits than Shador Sanders. But I think Shador Sanders has some traits, NFL traits, that are better than Cam Ward. He's I think, the most accurate quarterback in this draft class, right? His accuracy is generally good. His ball location is good. He has arguably the best decision making in this draft class. He very rarely puts the ball in harm's way. Now, where that breaks down, like there's two different types of decision making, right? There's like decision making when you throw the ball towards defenders, or there's like, are you going to take a stupid sack when you didn't need to? And those are, two sides of the same coin to a degree. Rodgers is it still like the lowest interception rate in NFL history? But he always took more sacks than most other great quarterbacks, right? And those things are connected. It's not, in order to preserve the interception rate, sometimes you have to take a sack. When a Brett Favre, for example, would have just gone YOLO and fired the ball and hoped it worked out well.
And the EPA nerds would tell you bad sack rate over time is worse. You don't want to be too far in the sack rate spectrum in taking those sacks, because eventually they're as bad as the interceptions. Carry on.
Yeah. Now, where I think it goes too far is, so he has a weaker arm than Cam Ward. That's basically unequivocal fact. Like, lock it in, right? I don't think that means his arm is bad. And I think people go way too far with his arm strength questions. I think Shador's arm strength is perfectly fine. It's not great. It's not elite. It's not, it's not as good as Cam Ward's, but it's fine. It just fits into that category to me of like, it's not a notable data point one way or the other, right? It's like, it doesn't jump out as good, doesn't jump out as bad. It's just what it is. It's just middle of the pack. It's not a positive or a negative. It's like where the zero grades exist in PFF grading. It's an as expected. It's a perfectly normal caliber NFL arm.
I thought the Hail Mary throw where he was rolling to his left and threw the ball 50 yards on a line. I mean, if anything was going to, I know you don't want to use deep ball or, how far a guy threw it to judge arm strength. He threw that 50 plus yards on a line. LeJontay Wester with the game tying Hail Mary at the end of regulation. That was a good description. By the way, Tom Brady had an absolute cannon for the majority of his career. Straight up velocity. Drew Brees didn't really, but Brady threw the ball hard. He always gets this knock about the arm strength. I'm just responding to the chat. I don't think Montana had the high RPMs. Brees didn't really have the high RPMs. It's not necessary. You could certainly win without it. But I wouldn't put Brady in that category. That dude zipped it. But
so what do you think?
Shador has enough arm. I think he has enough arm. I think it's interesting. Like, this doesn't matter at all. He's got one of the highest release points I've ever seen. So you've made the point, right? You made a little bit of a joke where, like, early in his life, it looked like, hey, Dion said, you don't have my athleticism, go play quarterback, kid. And that because he doesn't move any. I mean, don't say like his dad, but he's not a great athlete. And that's going to be an issue, I think, for Shador. He looks like he's been working on his throwing mechanics. Like, he's just trying to be the perfect over the top, high arm slot guy. So I think he's just this like he's trying to be this mechanical looking quarterback, high arm slot, everything's smooth, everything's good. And the ball comes out fine. And it's just mostly mechanically sound.
It is wild that his like the thing he's lacking is like a child of Deion Sanders, who's arguably the greatest athlete that's ever set foot on an NFL field, right? Elite speed, 4.2 type of speed, insane athleticism, hops, like explosiveness, pure fast twitch fibers, nothing but that. His weakness, like his offspring's weakness, is he has none of that. Like Shador Sanders has a reasonable arm, but again, it's like a nondescript arm. He's moderately athletic, but like it's a weakness relative to Cam Ward or relative to any of these other guys. And he seems to think that he's way more athletic than he is, or like nobody's told him that he doesn't have that athleticism yet. And yet, like, that's the one thing you would expect. If I told you nothing other than, hey, Deion Sanders' kid is a quarterback, coming out of Colorado this year, like, what would you expect him to be? Right? You would be imagining like Lamar Jackson, that type of quarterback. And yet he's nothing like that. Nothing level, like not even in the same stratosphere in terms of athleticism. It's wild that that's how genetics works. That this guy who's one of the greatest athletes ever has a son who has just none of that.
And so here's what I want to say, because I'm with you. I wrote down most of his negative plays. Most of the plays we say that's bad are preventable sacks. Most of his negative plays are sacks. He didn't miss a ton of throws. I know if JT is still in the chat, JT was looking for, it's a lot of screen game. There's a lot of behind the line of scrimmage stuff. He doesn't throw the ball down the field a ton. That's a big part of, there's a big part of that 74% completion percentage that led the NCAA that you see on the screen there. But he doesn't make a lot of with the ball bad decisions, right? You have an awful late pick 6 against Nebraska under pressure. Nebraska game wasn't great, but he doesn't make a lot of bad decisions. I mean, and we'll talk about this with Jackson Dart at some point, wherever he ranks. I didn't think Dart made a ton of bad decisions other than the Florida game. And so for Sanders, I'm not saying he needs speed. He doesn't need to run necessarily. I didn't like his just pocket mobility, and I didn't like his pocket movement. I thought he felt pressure. He feels it. And we'll talk about why he's feeling it, because, Colorado's offensive line. He feels the pressure. I don't think he reacts to it well most of the time. There's not a whole lot of stepping up through the pocket. And remind me to circle back to that. I don't want to go on the whole rant here, but how much of this is bad habit versus this is how he plays? Because the Colorado offensive line was even worse. I mean, I watch a lot of college football, and the whole time I want to be like, it's not as bad as it feels. It's when you start watching the film, it's worse, I think, than I even thought. So how much does his vacating backwards be out of the pocket, which, by the way, Russell Wilson got away with, Kyler Murray got away with. Guys can get away with that stuff. Mahomes gets away with his driftiness and everything, but those guys are in different stratospheres as athletes. I worry about Shedeur, his pocket athleticism, the number of times he was trying to evade a sack, evade a rusher, and it didn't work. That's concerning. Is that a bad habit, or is that how he plays? That's a huge question, I think, for him and his projection.
That's his biggest question. To me, that's by far the biggest question. Like, if you take that away, if he had a good sort of sack rate, right, and didn't take many sacks right now, I think people would feel so much better about him as a prospect. That's his big question. And you're right. The Colorado offensive line, it's very difficult to overstate just how bad it was. I mean, there were whole games where like a clean pocket in 2.5 seconds was a genuine, like, notable occurrence, right? And so this is where it gets complicated, right? Because you can look at clean pocket versus under pressure, and you can say, well, when he's kept clean, this happens, and when he's under pressure, this happens. But we know that the volume of pressure changes how a quarterback behaves, even on the plays where he's not under pressure. Think back to Baker Mayfield when he had Greg Robinson at his left tackle in Cleveland, right? And Greg Robinson was such a turnstile that eventually Baker Mayfield starts changing the way he plays the game. Every play, he's now like, eye over his shoulder to the left and leaking out to the right and causing his own problems, right? Because when you start leaking right every play, like just as a matter of instinct, well, now the defense knows where you're going. They know what you're doing. Pass rushers start altering their pathway to the quarterback, and suddenly like every play is under pressure, right? So it changes how you behave. So I ended up going back and watching some Jackson State tape to try and figure out, like, okay, how much of this is the thing, the system that he's in, and how much of this is like, this is how he behaves. I think his relationship with pressure is a lot better in Jackson State than it was in Colorado. I hated that Colorado offense. Like, so many screens. The system I thought was bad. The offensive line was just straight garbage. But I think, interestingly, if you look at PFF stable metrics, I think they actually sum up Shedeur Sanders almost perfectly, right, last year. Basically, if you look at the stable metrics, the stuff that theoretically projects the best to the next level year on year, he's good at everything except sack rate. He, is very good from a clean pocket, very good with standard dropbacks, early downs, no play action, all that kind of stuff. His best trait is avoiding the negative plays, like not throwing the ball to the defense, not making, head face palm type decisions. 97th percentile at that. And yet his sack rate, 18th percentile. So by far the single biggest problem is the dude takes too many sacks, and a lot of them are bad. The question is, how much of that is him, like inherent, how much of that is part of his makeup and a problem, and how much of that is the system was bad. The offensive line was even worse. And if you move those, if you make those even just average, let alone good, how much does that completely change his behavior? And actually, it becomes a non-factor. Remember, this was also the biggest question everybody had about Jaden Daniels last year. And he still took more sacks than the average quarterback. And yet the numbers were moved in his favor enough that nobody gives a crap anymore, right? Like it went from, man, that's a problem. That translates, college to the NFL. That's an issue. And now a year later, he was so good that nobody gives a rat's ass that he still takes more sacks than most quarterbacks.
But usually the quarterbacks with higher sack rates are also more scrambling type quarterbacks. Yes. They usually add value with the run game. So with a Jaden Daniels, even at the NFL level, you could say, yeah, but he's going to scramble enough times that it offsets things, and he's also going to be part of the design run game. That's the huge concern with Sanders because, your camera's moving. I like it better zoomed in. I think that's better. That's the question with Shedeur. Does he have enough big playability? Because right now, does he do enough throwing the ball 10 plus yards down the field to offset a potentially high sack rate? And also, as you said, is the high sack rate just a product of his environment, or these all terrible habits that have been built into his game now?
And just to be like extra special clear, like I'm not saying he's as good as Jaden Daniels, but what I'm saying is the sack rate thing is not necessarily, a death knell for a quarterback, because Jaden Daniels proves that if he's good enough with other things, you don't care, right? It's still a relative weakness to Jaden Daniels' game. It's just that now that we've seen him in the NFL, we don't care anymore, right? It's no longer like when everything is an unknown, when you're projecting these guys from college to the NFL, a weakness can be like, this is the thing, right? This is the boogeyman. This is the reason he's not going to work in the NFL level. It's his Achilles heel, right? That's how everything is framed. But once you see them in the NFL, you're like, well, actually, it's a weakness, but it's not who cares? It's not a problem. He's so good at everything else that we don't give a crap anymore. What I'm saying is this is easily Shedeur Sanders' biggest flaw by a mile. And we don't know how much to care about it because we don't know how everything else is going to translate and how much of it changes once you adjust how bad his offensive line is.
I love that you needed to clarify before Commanders fans who are already a little sensitive toward you, Mr. AP voter. Just had to make sure that we were not putting Shedeur Sanders and the great Jaden Daniels on the same plane. We would not do that. You would not do that. You had to preface it. Still no, you still might get the sound clip. You still could get the sound clip out there, a little soundbite analysis that you think Shedeur's as good as Jaden, same guy as Jaden Daniels. That could happen. A couple other notes, because as bad as the offensive line was, and I don't know how JT feels about the playmakers that Shedeur was thrown to, other than tight end 31. I thought they were good. LeJontay Wester. I mean, we know Travis Hunter. LeJontay Wester, every single time, he's undersized jitterbug type. Every time I'm watching Colorado, that dude feels like he's stealing the show. Will Shepard, they've got some draftable players here as far as pass catchers go. And it's an interesting Dion team building situation here, right? For 2 years, they couldn't fix the offensive line in the portal era, but they did find some dudes to throw to, and of course had Travis Hunter. So I think that offset things a little bit. But overall, I would also say Shedeur elevated this Colorado team that wasn't great defensively, didn't have a great offensive line. So you have a guy and this is big, right? Elevate the squad, elevate the team. Colorado, they weren't very competitive in 2023. They were early. We thought they would be. They won 3 or 4 games. Last year they were. I mean, they weren't competing for the national title or anything, but I think he elevated them. So there's that. And then the one last thing I want to say about the athleticism is the off-platform throws from Shedeur. Those kind of scare me a little bit. And I know there's highlights, right? I saw Dan Orlovsky putting the Kansas State throw where he rolls to his left. And he's got some good ones in there. They just scare me, right? I think they're hit or miss. So Shedeur, outside of the system, so to speak, where I think he's pretty accurate up to 20 yards. I think he reads it out well. I would also say, I don't know if you noticed this on film, I thought he was much better against zone than against man. So when he faces zone, I think he reads it out. He throws to spots, just understands the game. Like he's just a good, hate to say game manager-y type, but I think that's kind of his style. Not going to miss a ton of throws, throw to the right spot for the most part. When he had man coverage, things were locked up because he doesn't have that great scrambling ability. And I don't know if he's like the tight window, just, throw it away from coverage type of guy all the time. I thought he struggled a little bit more in those situations.
Yeah, like he's not special creating outside of structure at all. Like, and again, ironically, if you were imagining Deion Sanders' son at quarterback, what would you imagine him just intuitively in your brain? What kind of style would he play with? You would assume he's good at that kind of stuff. No, he is much more like he is your more standard standard cerebral processing quarterback, makes good decisions. Like that side of his game, I don't think gets enough credit. Like this is why people look at him and say, well, look, all these negatives, the taking sacks thing, the lack of athleticism, the lack of traits, why is he good, right? Why is he still seen as QB2 in this draft and a guy that could go number 2 or number 3 overall? He has a career 1.7% turnover worthy play rate. It's never been above 2.1% in a season, despite multiple years of catastrophe at offensive line, right? That type of turnover worthy play rate is NFL league leading level, right? It's like an elite number. And if you
by the
look
way,
at
that's skewed by all the screens too, because those count
sure,
in the denominator. So that helps.
but if you look at plays where he's under pressure, the number is still 1.8%, right? Like he doesn't put the ball in harm's way. The other thing is people are like, well, maybe Shedeur makes the offensive line look worse. There are definitely plays where he does, right? Like these are the bad sacks we're talking about, where he tries to make something happen, tries to run away from pressure in a way he's simply not capable of doing. And yeah, if you want to charge that to an offensive lineman, like that's silly. So those plays, he's making them look worse. Overall, though, he is not making the offensive line look worse. In fact, the offensive line is making him look worse in that relationship. If you look at his plays, so he was under pressure, according to PFF, 35.6% of the time last year. That's not a massive figure. That's not, guys over 40% exist, right? But when he's kept clean, his average time to throw is 2.3 seconds, right? The reason he's under pressure that few times is they're having a ton of screens, right? That stuff you talked about. There's a lot of like quick throws in there. And the plays where he's not under pressure, the ball is coming out like instantly in order to not be under pressure. When they have to actually drop back and pass, the pressure is almost every single play. It's universal. So for him to maintain an extremely low, bad decision-making rate, like even independent, take away the screens, it's still very good. For him to maintain that good decision-making rate in the face of pressure and the volume of pressure he gets, I think is extremely impressive.
Yeah, one last stat I just wanted to add to this too. It kind of shows the screen game and short stuff and JT's question about him throwing down the field. I looked at recent draft classes, draftable quarterbacks, where he ranked uncatchable passes. Shedeur is in this. So here's the order: Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, Mac Jones, Shedeur Sanders, and then Tua. That's the top 5 when they're in college. Lowest percentage of uncatchable passes. So he's kind of in this like game managery type of list of quarterbacks coming out. But that drops that. So instead of 4th, that drops to 24th in that class or among recent classes on 10+ yard throws. So when he's throwing the ball down the field, the uncatchable rate goes up much higher. So he's protected a little bit by the system, but overall, he lands in this game managery type of land. I see some Teddy Bridgewater comps coming up in the chat. I'm trying to like turn away from comps because people take the whole 100%. I could see the Teddy Bridgewater-ish type of spectrum though for Shedeur Sanders. I also would say if I was tiering these, I would have Cam Ward in his own tier. I would have Shedeur in his next tier. And then we'll get to the next group. I'll preface this by saying, I don't know, 3 through 8 for me, not completely interchangeable, but close. So I would say I'd have Shedeur Sanders a tick below the Cam Ward prospect here heading into this
So
year.
last year, I think, is not a great example because all of the quarterbacks last year had pretty impressive traits. But generally, the point I would make is quarterbacks that do not have elite physical traits get knocked in the pre-draft process, right? We don't like them because it's harder to see why they're good, right? But I think that his physical traits compare perfectly reasonably to the year before last. And you start looking at Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, like his traits are in the same category with those guys, right? They're not special. The reason they're good, the reason they were good prospects exists outside of the physical tools, right? It exists in the way they play the game. Shedeur is the most accurate quarterback in this class. he's one of the best decision makers in this class. And then the flip side of that is on the cons list, he takes a ton of really terrible sacks, and we don't know yet how much of that is him and how much of that is on the system. Like, not just the offensive line, which is bad, but the offense in Colorado was bad. Like, that's not a pro style system, ironically, for a system that Pat Shurmur was the offensive coordinator. Like, you would assume, oh, they're running a pro style offense. No, that offense I thought was terrible. So I don't think he's being helped at all by the system around him. I think he absolutely belongs in the top half of the first round. And I think that anyone saying like he's a second round, he's a day 2 guy with a first round name, you know, a day 2 guy with Deion's pedigree, I think they're just not watching him play, honestly.
The other comps that have come up in the chat, Alex Smith is the guy that we always called, you know, super game manager type. Also kind of had a high sack rate for a game manager. So Alex Smith, Teddy Bridgewater, I'd throw Sam Bradford the way he played at the NFL level. If Shedeur is going to play the same exact way at the NFL level, that is the type of quarterback that it could look like. That's all I'm saying. Anything else on Shedeur? A little over an hour in here. 2 quarterbacks in. We talked about other stuff, Sam, at the top, but I think we've touched on some big stuff here.
I think that's him summed up.
2 quarterbacks in. We're on to QB3 in our top 10. Who's your QB3, Sam?
We'll go faster the longer down the list we go.
We will. Theoretically.
QB3 is the same as everybody else's. Jackson Dart, Ole Miss.
Same. Yeah, we're the same all the way through, maybe. QB3, Jackson Dart. Now, here's what before you get into the Jackson Dart thing, I would say I think Dart's a little closer to the next tier of quarterbacks myself. And when I ranked 3 through 8, I don't see massive differences. I think they're all developmental guys. I think they all have positives to work around and negatives as well. So I'm more of the Jackson Dart's more of a day 2 and beyond type of player than he is a day 1. I know we've heard plenty of rumors about him going in round 1 here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And I think there's a bigger gap between Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart than people seem to be making out there is now. I think I think Shedeur is closer to Cam Ward than he is Jackson Dart, to be honest. And I actually think a lot of
I want to say the similarities though between Dart and Sanders. I think there's a lot of similarities for me in how they play.
Yeah, but I actually think a lot of the negatives that people are applying to Shedeur apply equally to Jackson Dart, and I'm not hearing any of those at the moment, which is wild. Like, everyone's focusing on the positive for Dart and the negative for Shedeur, and yet I think if anything, they're worse for Dart.
You and I, we unlocked that a little bit, I think, when we were talking to Renner, and that was a great discussion that we had with him last Thursday. If you haven't seen it yet, we were saying, and we're trying to change this, the way we talk about players is always relative to these expectations, right? Sanders is a perceived number 2 overall pick that people are trying to pick apart and say, well, he's not worth number 2 overall. Jackson Dart is this former 3rd round prospect. It was a 3rd rounder 2 months ago that people are trying to talk back up into the 1st round. If they were coming from different places, the conversations would change. You would talk about, here's what Shedeur does well to deserve to go in the 1st round. Here's what Jackson Dart doesn't do well to not deserve to go number 2 overall, when theoretically they might be a similar late 1st round type of prospect, honestly, when it's all said and done.
Well, so if I was that's where I think, I mean, you and I obviously disagree. Just again, this is how this works this year. Everyone has the same order. The only disagreement is how close together they are. If you come from the starting point of Shedeur was either 1 or 2 overall and Jackson Dart is a 3rd round player, I agree that they are closer than that and that the 2 should be seen as closer than that. But I also I think it's moving too far to say that they're basically in the same place, right? Like, to me, Shedeur is a guy that could and should go in the top 10, and Jackson Dart is a guy that should be a fringe 1st, early 2nd round type of player. That's where they belong in actuality to me. So they're moving in the right directions in order to get closer together based off how they started. But I think that the conversation has gone too far. So Jackson Dart, a lot of the same flaws, right? Number 1, like, you have to navigate the Ole Miss offense, which again is not a pro style type of offense. It has its own quirks and characteristics they have to deal with. He also has a lot of the same tendencies, though, in terms of I don't think handle pressure particularly well. He's got very weak escapability, and has a similar tendency to try and make it happen anyway. And I feel like he has an even worse ability to get away from it than Shedeur Sanders does. Don't love his scrambling instincts either at all. Like he gets caught a lot trying to make plays happen when things are breaking down. His touch on deep passes is hit or miss. Like sometimes it's perfect, it's right in the bucket. Sometimes like, whoa, that's a rough pass given the one-on-one opportunity you had. The one thing I do like about him a lot is and then he doesn't have the traits that Cam Ward has. Again, falls into that kind of bucket of they're fine. They're not particularly noteworthy in either direction to me. The one thing he does have that I really like, though, is I have rarely seen a quarterback with the complete and total lack of processing time and thinking time that he has once he reads something, right? He's going through his read. And again, the offense, there's not that many, full field reads, sort of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 type of sequences. But when he gets the green light in his brain, right, when he looks up and he sees it and it's open, the ball is gone. Like it's instant. There's zero lag time. There's zero processing time. It's like a direct reflex connection between his brain and his arm that as soon as he gets the green light, the ball's gone. I love that.
I think a lot of that's that offense, though, too. Like they do a really good job of defining things. I mean, Lane Kiffin, remember when we were saying that the Tennessee offense a couple of years ago for Hendon Hooker is bad for NFL evaluations? That's a compliment to your college head coach, Tennessee fans. This is a compliment to Lane Kiffin. I mean, we talk about switch releases being like, kryptonite to NFL defenses. They're doing creative stuff off of switch releases that are just opening things up left and right. So I think they do a good job of defining the reads for Dart.
Sure. But even within that, even with that context, like his lack of thinking time in those situations is, I think, noteworthy. I think it's remarkable. Like even other quarterbacks in these systems where the reads are simple and it's like a yes or no, you can still see the lag, right? It's like being on a bad internet connection. You can see the split second of like thinking about it, right? Yes, this is good. Okay, I can throw it now, and then the ball's gone. Dart, it's all one connection. It's like the second, like literally the millisecond that his brain processes this is good, the ball's in the air.
I didn't always see that from him. I thought there was some delay there, but I didn't think it was as clean as what you're saying. You mentioned just to clarify a couple things here. I don't think he's a great athlete, pocket athlete. And the pushback I've gotten on that is that, well, he had 500, 600 rushing yards or whatever it is. I think he's a fine runner. I think he's a very willing runner, right? Like Wake Forest, he drops his head and like runs through 3 tackles. A little bit of Sam Howell to him. Sam Howell straight up played like a fullback, though, that final year. So I think Dart's like a fine scrambler, as far as picking up yards. But the similarities that I agree with you to say Shedeur Sanders is the pocket athleticism. When he tries to break free from a rusher, when he tries to maneuver the pocket, I don't love it. I don't love it I don't love it at all. Much like Shedeur, so I don't necessarily like his ability to break free from sacks, make special plays. Now, some of his best throws are the plays where he is a little bit on the move or getting hit. I think he makes huge throws getting hit. I think he's got great touch. The number of times that I wrote down touch for him versus other quarterbacks watching him, I think is astronomically in his favor. I thought the intermediate anticipation and feel was there. So when you said, hey, he sees it and I liked his anticipation at the intermediate level. I thought he saw some stuff really well there. So touch throws, the 10 to 19 yard throws, I think he was really good. I'm with you on the deep ball, very inconsistent. I don't even know what his deep ball stats are. I imagine that they're very good. But deep ball stats, if you're just using stats, those are often scheme-driven, wide receiver-driven. He had Trey Harris. He had some speed out there. He had Lane Kiffin. The stats are probably fine, but his deep ball was all over the place. He was long with it. He was short with it. But he's also willing to give his guys opportunities to make plays. He'll just chuck it up and let them go get it. So that, to me, at the NFL level, that could become really volatile. If you have dudes who can go up and get it, you might have some good years throwing the ball down the field. That profile reminds me a little bit of the way I described Sam Darnold coming out of USC. I thought Darnold was fantastic, intermediate level, inconsistent deep ball. I mentioned Mac Jones as a comp before, just around that lens where I think Mac Jones anticipation, intermediate level was good, deep ball, inconsistent. I think Jackson Dart has elements of those guys to their game. It's never 100% when it comes to comparisons.
Yeah, it's not. But I do think like Shador and Dart profile quite similarly. Like they're reasonably similar players. The question is like the differences around the fringes and how it manifests and how it's being talked about. And then, like the chat is complaining about, oh, one of them is a product of their offense and the other one isn't. Like everyone is a product of their offense to some degree. The question is how much. Colorado's offensive line was extreme in terms of how bad it is. Ole Miss's was not, right? So that's relevant when we're trying to figure out how much of a flaw is on the quarterback versus the system, right? These are the things. So, like, I think these two guys have very similar strengths and weaknesses, but the question is trying to figure out how extreme A are they with those traits, and B are the other influencing factors in those traits. For Shador, the offensive line was extreme in terms of its influence in how he played and how many sacks he took and those negative plays. It wasn't for Jackson Dart. So when you're comparing like the negative tendencies to run around at the back, get sacked, take bad plays under pressure, like that's a relevant factor in terms of which one, where's the slider, right? How much is on the QB? How much is on the offense?
The other thing I would say that's different between Dart and Shador too, I thought Dart struggled against good zone coverage when teams matched up against Ole Miss's route concepts. That's when I think he started to drop his eyes, and you see that's what you're going to see a lot at the NFL level, right? Zone principles that are zone match type of principles. When that stuff was taken away, I saw Jackson Dart more out of his element. When he's seeing man coverage and he could, chuck the one-on-one or whatever, or it was just schemed open, I thought he did a nice job of finding that. Whereas Shador was the opposite, right? When he had zone, bing, bang, boom, he's finding his guys. Once they were manned up, he didn't have the dynamism to go make a play. So I thought they were a little different stylistically there, just what I saw, what I observed on film.
And I think Dart is he's not as good a decision maker as I think he's slightly worse in terms of accuracy. I think he's slightly worse in terms of decision making. I think he might be slightly better in terms of, or at least in a similar world in terms of how they react to pressure, how they handle those types of things. But it gets made to look a lot better because his offensive line wasn't nearly as terrible as Shador's was.
I thought Dart, I don't have his turnover-worthy play percentages handy. I thought he actually took solid. Yeah, he took really good care of the ball. And then the end of the Florida game happened when I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. There's probably 4 passes that should have been picked. I think 2 were absolutely directly on him where he's just chucking it into double coverage. And we're talking like down 7 with time on the clock. This wasn't down 7 with 10 seconds left. You got to take a chance. Like it was bad. Ole Miss's defense made a stop or 2 to give him more opportunities, and he continued to throw the ball to the defense. But there was at least 2 miscommunications there with his. It still might have been a bad decision, but you're talking about receivers stopping, and he's aggressive. He's trying to throw 50-50 balls a lot, and if his receivers stop in his route, it's going to look worse. So the end of the Florida game was bad overall, but maybe not like, hey, he should have thrown 3 or 4 picks bad. It was just 2 picks bad.
Yeah, according to PFF, he had 10 turnover-worthy plays last season, and 4 of them came in the LSU game. Like, they came in bunches. Generally, overall, it was 2.2%. Which is still really good, but as I said, Shador's was 1.7, I think, and had never been above 2 for his entire career. So again, it's like they're both strengths, but Shador's was better.
What'd you think of Dart's arm, by the way, too? Because this is where, I think there's more similarities than differences. Cam Ward has a cannon and plays hero ball. Shador and Dart, I don't think they both have great arms. They're fine, and they don't play hero ball as much. But Dart, I don't think Dart had a great arm. I thought it was okay RPM wise and just okay arm wise.
Same falls into the same bucket of Shador's as it's an as expected. It's a non-notable in one direction or the other. It's a root. It's an arm. If I'm not bringing it up at all, it's because it's just run of the mill arm. It's not strong. It's not weak. It's just normal.
The last thing I'll say on Dart, I mean, I've seen some people talking analytical profiled in favor of Jackson Dart. I mean, overall, he's been a pretty productive college quarterback. Going way back to the beginning of the show, I don't think there's any sort of analytical model or anything that should always point to this guy or that guy. But Dart's going to be near the top of those profiles, whether you're using PFF grades or the breakdown of grades and various metrics. And so that's one thing I think that's in Dart's favor, not as a slam dunk, but you just kind of like push him up over some other guys. Multiple years of good production from Jackson Dart.
Yep.
Good there. Mm-hmm. All right. I think 3 through 8 is very close. That's all I'm saying. 3 through 8 is very close. 4 through 8 in particular, I would almost lump these next. I'd put Dart, maybe he's a tick above the rest for me, right? 4 through 8 for me, Sam, maybe 9. All guys that they're all developmental, day round 3 and beyond. I could see a path where they have success. I could see a path where they never get beyond backup or they're out of the league, right? I could see all of this. So to me, there's not a big difference between these next guys. I know people like linear lists and everything, but this tier for me is very similar, where I could talk myself into a path to success, but I could also see, there's reasons why they're not, round 1 type of guys.
Yeah, I think it's a big 3. However you want to distribute those guys, where exactly they fall. Those are the 3 guys I think that have a realistic path towards starting pretty quickly. Then I think there's a drop off, and then I think you start to get into the next tier, some of whom have definite starter ability / traits, but are a work in progress. Some of whom I think are definitely just backups to begin with. To me, we mentioned this on the Renner show, and it stayed this way. QB4 for me is Dillon Gabriel from Oregon / all of the other colleges that he played at.
I did the same thing. So we're all going to be high. I did Dillon Gabriel at 4. I mean, we're going to all have, you, me, and Renner are going to be higher on Dillon Gabriel. And again, I don't think there's a big difference between him and whoever lands at 8 on my list here, but there's some reasons why we like him. So let's get into it. What do you like about Dillon Gabriel?
So again, like I don't know why the physical traits thing, I don't think people see it particularly well. Aside from anything else, like how much should you value it? I don't trust people's analysis of it. Like, again, I go back to Baker Mayfield was short, so people assumed he couldn't throw the ball very hard, even though Baker Mayfield has a cannon for an arm. Dillon Gabriel is short, so people think that Dillon Gabriel has like marginal NFL tools physically, but he's athletic, he's strong, and he's got a strong arm. Like, Dillon Gabriel has functional, if not pretty solid, NFL physical traits, other than the fact that he's short.
I think he zips it, man. I mean, sometimes it depends on the order in which you watch them. So I watched Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and then Dillon Gabriel. I think he zips it better than both Shedeur and
strongest
Dart.
Of the 3, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think he rips the ball. And then he has this pass against Ohio State, first Ohio State game. Denzel Burke, the corner for Ohio State, he had a rough game. But Dillon Gabriel's on the far hash mark, and Denzel Burke looks like, I'm not going to cover this go ball on the far hash. He's not even going to try. Nobody tries this throw. And Gabriel puts it about 50-plus yards, mostly in stride, to Tez Johnson. But I really think Burke just stopped covering it because QBs don't make the far hash go ball throw. They don't throw that pass very often. And I thought Gabriel surprised him with his arm. So again, I'm not saying he's Josh Allen, but if you're ranking arms in the class, I think Gabriel's closer to the top than he is. Better arm than Will Howard, better arm than Jackson Dart, than Shedeur Sanders, and some of the other guys that are considered to be big arm or that are considered either near the top of the draft or a guy like Will Howard, who's considered a toolsy type of player.
Again, like it's do you comment on these things as if you don't comment on them, they're just sort of irrelevant. They're not strengths, they're not weaknesses. I think you're actually commenting on Dillon Gabriel's physical tools. I think he has a strong arm, not just like a normal arm that we don't need to talk about. I think he's athletic enough for that to be a factor, and actually a positive in his game. Like he's short and stocky, but he's powerful. He's got good running ability. And his arm is legit. Like, it's not just a non-factor. It's actually a positive to his game. The other thing, obviously, is like literally the most experienced quarterback to enter the NFL ever. I mean, 63 starts in college. That's already that's now breaking the Bo Nix record, which was the previous most experience ever. Unlike Bo Nix, he was actually good everywhere. Like, Bo Nix at least had struggles on his way to being a 60 start quarterback. Like, Dillon Gabriel was good everywhere. 63 starts. As Renner pointed out on our show, like was also a freshman starter in high school in a high volume passing attack. This guy might legitimately have attempted more passes since the age of like 14 than any other player to ever enter the NFL. Like 6-year college career, UCF, Oklahoma, and Oregon, top 90 in PFF grade in 2 of those 3 places, and was high 80s in the 3rd place. Like, this is a guy that's always been good and done it at multiple different programs. Again, despite being short and not being the kind of prototypical 6'4", 250-pound guy.
And so with the short thing, it felt like an issue for Bryce Young until it didn't, right? Bryce Young went into the NFL, looked overwhelmed for his first year, plus his first 2 starts, got benched, and then all of a sudden he looked down the stretch last year. He looked like the guy that went number 1 overall at Alabama. So we thought I thought Tua's arm at the NFL level looked weak. It looked like a hindrance his first couple of years, but he offset that. And then he eventually offset that with Mike McDaniel and the anticipation and the other skills that he brought to the table. I'm not saying Gabriel's definitely going to do that, right? The height is still an issue, but he's played like that his entire career. And I'll say this too, right? After watching Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, not only does he have a better arm, I think he's quicker. You know, I'm watching Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders trying to avoid pressure. Gabriel does that better than both of the guys that we've ranked ahead of him. And he's produced at a high level at multiple spots, as we've said, UCF and Oklahoma and at Oregon. Didn't finish great at Oregon, but he played well in some big games, including the game-winning touchdown run against Ohio State in their regular season matchup. So he had the I can't remember. I think Texas ended up pulling off the win, but he had what should have been a game winner against Texas in the Red River rivalry in 2023, you know, making some big throws. So I like a lot of Gabriel's game. I think he has enough arm to get the ball outside the numbers. He likes to throw the ball on the run, does a pretty good job of that as well. I think he's just a really good, productive quarterback. And he's also, remember, sitting at the Senior Bowl, watching him, he's sitting in there trying to go through reads. He is trying to play quarterback. He's not trying to make plays outside the pocket. I think he judges when he should do that fairly well as well. When he should make a play, when he should sit and go through reads, when he should, scramble and try to make something happen outside of structure.
Yeah. I don't think, again, I think he's a tick worse than some of these other guys at a couple of those things, the decision-making, the accuracy overall. But in terms of once you're outside of that big 3 and you're like, who's the next quarterback that we think has a shot to start, a shot to make it as a starter, Gabriel will be the guy I'd pick.
The other part of his game, so one of the things I don't love about Gabriel's game is actually his short area accuracy. So like he's the complete inverse, I think, of the stereotype, right? He's supposed to not have a great arm, so you would assume his short area ball location is great. He's kind of all over the place from what I've seen on some of the short stuff, whether it's slants or screens. He's kind of all over the place, but he rips the deep out, rips the seam route. He can layer that unbelievable layered seam route against UCLA right past potential first-round linebacker Carson Schwessinger. I think he's actually a better downfield thrower than he is short area stuff. So it's kind of inverse of what the short quarterback stereotype, the poo-armed stereotype that you would expect.
The poo-armed stereotype.
Yeah. Diddly poo, didn't do squat. Is that it on Gabriel? Is that all we got?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have that much to say about him other than I think he's kind of being underrated and slept on a little bit in the process.
Here's the last thing I'll say. I'm going to contradict myself here. Perfect. The NFL, we go into these runs, Sam, of what are the most recent hits at the quarterback position. And I mentioned earlier in the show that we had this run of the toolsy quarterbacks being bad, and then all of a sudden they started hitting Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, however you want to break those guys down. We're now in the middle of a run where the experienced quarterbacks, we're starting to sneak in some experienced QBs, Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. So to me, overreacting to recency bias, I think Dylan Gabriel's that guy, right? Production profile, QB skills. The only knock is the height. I'm not saying he would be going round 1 if he's 6'3", but maybe he should. Actually, I will say that. If he's 6'3", he's going round 1 with everything that he's done. Boom. Similar thing that we said about Bryce Young. Now, he's not good enough to go round 1 like Bryce Young did a couple years ago, despite his height. But Gabriel's the guy. He would be the top guy I want to take a shot on in the developmental role, slightly above the rest of this group 4 through 8 here.
Yeah, we're in this world now where I don't think anyone knows what to do with the current kind of this is the college football landscape. Like the profiles of players that are coming out in terms of college career are very different. And we're now seeing guys work out who have only been a 1-year starter, right? It doesn't matter if you sucked for 4 years at 2 different colleges. If you suddenly end up in the right one and you break out and you look amazing, you can be Jaden Daniels, right? Like it's not necessarily true that if you couldn't work in the first couple places, like that's a red flag. That's a problem. Equally, we're seeing guys who have this like extremely extensive career and they've been in multiple different places and they've been good everywhere. Like I don't think anyone knows anymore like what to make of any of this stuff other than it's unusual, it's new, like it's a novelty. So guys like Gabriel who have been at multiple different programs and been good at all of them and have played in college, for 6 years. Previously, I think that would have been, for some reason, shape, or form, like a red flag. It would have been like, this is a weird profile. I'm not loving this. Now it's like, this is just the world. This is just college football.
So I'll say that. Gabriel's the one guy. He's the top guy I would take in a developmental role. The next 5 or 6 QBs, I'll give you a good reason why you could maybe take a shot on them in a developmental role. So I don't even remember how I ranked them because I really didn't have great conviction in 4 through 8 generally, but let's say 5 through 8 specifically. So who's QB 5 for you, Sam?
This is the first one where I struggle to actually put a guy here. The first 3, I think, pretty much take care of themselves. I think Gabriel is the guy that I'm most comfortable with in 4, and then 5, I went through 4 different guys to put him in number 5, and ultimately, the one I went with is maybe the one I feel the worst about. But I'm like, okay, number 5, who actually has NFL starting tools that I think might be able to turn it into something? And I went with Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
All right. I considered Milroe here. I put Milroe at 6. So let's just have our Jalen Milroe discussion here first. So what did you like about Milroe and why did he end up at 5 here for you?
So obviously, I mean, he's an exceptional athlete. Like he's big, strong, fast. His arm is legit. He ran a 4.4 something with an insane, like he ran so the 4.4 at his pro day, but apparently his 10 split was like 1.44, which is off the charts elite for like that's Tank Dell levels of 10-yard split time. Like that's lightning acceleration in addition to the speed. He's got extremely good escapability. Like Shador, Jackson Dart, like these are guys that struggle to get out of things. Jalen Milroe's very good at getting away from pressure and problems and, elite pass rushers that are bearing down on him. That's like a real strength of his. He can extend plays, escape trouble, like really lean on that athleticism. Obviously, we have the weird quirk of his hand size, which at the Senior Bowl was wildly small and under the threshold. And then at the Combine was like, no, actually, it's fine.
Did we get, what was he at the Combine? Did we update that to 9? It's
the
like a
Combine was way above 9. It was like he grew his hand like 7/8 of an inch or something.
By the way, Will Campbell did make it over 33 inches while we're here. Breaking news, Will Campbell is a tackle now, 33-inch arms at his pro day today. So, yeah, it's a legendary offseason of, growing hand size and arm length. QB School says, ooh, we're in the similar ballpark, 1 to 4. Go follow QB School on YouTube. JT O'Sullivan, he's the man. Watch his videos, do his Patreon, do the whole thing.
So the other thing, now here's the thing. Here's where it gets problematic, right? Because you're always conditioned by like what's recent history like. So I don't love Jalen Milroe's tape, right? I think there's some problems. There's some wild inconsistency. The accuracy can be very rough at times. But now, so number 1, I didn't love Jalen Hurts' tape, right? I didn't think he had any shot of working out based off his tape, and he's ended up actually becoming a really good NFL quarterback. Also, Milroe's working with Jordan Palmer, one of these QB gurus. Now, Jordan's got, let's say, it's a mixed bag of results so far based off the quarterbacks that have worked with him, right? You can't give him credit for Sam Darnold because that took Kevin O'Connell basically to fix Darnold, right? You can't give him credit for that, but he did have Josh Allen. Like you can argue Jordan Palmer's the guy that fixed Josh Allen. But he worked with, I think, Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and some of these other guys that you would say those are good. Those are hits. On the other hand, we've got Kyle Allen and Jarrett Stidham and Drew Lock and, some other quarterbacks that haven't worked out that well. But generally,
He's
I would
just like
say
us. He's got the same hit rate as all of us as far as,
right.
turning them
But
into
generally, I
top
would
product.
say it's a good thing that Milroe has connected himself to one of these sort of personal coach QB guru types, because he does have a lot to work on based off his college tape.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the Jalen Hurts comp before, just maybe a little bit of same school, because Hurts was Alabama, obviously, before Oklahoma. I don't see any similarities there as
No,
far as
not
Hurts.
similar,
Hurts
other than the fact that they're
you just didn't
QBs I
like the
didn't
state.
like. You had athletic tools and then worked out.
Yeah, and so like I said at the top of the show, if you go through all the data points and say, well, what leads to the good quarterbacks? I mean, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in PFF accuracy charting data were awful, right, at the time. And Allen had awful PFF grade. I mean, if you start doing comps and certain stats, you're going to have great quarterbacks looking terrible in the college stats, and you'll say, oh, he's just like this guy. Just nothing's 1-to-1. To me, I go back to this Milroe. The athleticism is so special. You could build a running offense around him. So this is why I say the difference between him and the Kyle McCords, Will Howards, and these other guys we're going to talk about, it's like, what do you want in your developmental quarterback? If you're a coach that builds the run game around the quarterback, okay, Milroe has this foundation to work with. I always call that a high floor offense, even though Milroe's passing is anything but high floor. It is all over the place. And as watching him in passing through the years, it's like I didn't want to like him at all. Then I started to like him more than I thought I would. Georgia game, Vanderbilt game, even though they lost. And then you have these other games where he's awful, and it's just so inconsistent. So I think it's a high floor potential, just because Milroe could have the game I always describe as the JT Barrett game. You go 10 for 24 passing, but you add 80 yards on the ground on 20 carries, and it actually moves the ball. Milroe, you could build an offense around him. He can protect your offensive line because of his running ability. I know Bama had him running 4.37. You're right. It was more like 4.4s. It's legit, right? This is the same stuff we would have said about Lamar. He's not as good as Lamar. Similar stuff that we would have said about Anthony Richardson, which is probably a better comp, right? Anthony Richardson. And I don't care about Richardson's size. That part doesn't matter. His RAS doesn't matter. Don't even mention it. Similar athleticism, build your offense around them, but the accuracy is just all over the place, and that needs to get better to actually reach that potential.
And another reason I think Richardson is a good comp for him is, like Richardson, I think he does read it out pretty well. A lot of the times we think of these quarterbacks who are athletic freaks and not particularly good passers, we assume it's like a mental problem, right? They're just bad at reading defenses. That's what you'll hear all the time when you hear these guys. Look at his numbers, look at his athleticism. He's just a bad mental processor. He can't read a defense. It's all Richardson was really good at that relative to his experience. His problems were he just can't hit the broadside of a barn door. His accuracy is horrific. Milroe is of a similar bent, where his problems I don't think are mental. His problems are it's mechanical. He can't accurately throw the ball consistently. I think he actually reads it out pretty well most of the time. And again, so number one, people will be like, well, what's the difference between him and Anthony Richardson? One big difference is where they're likely to go. Richardson was being talked about as a top 10 quarterback all the way along. Milroe is being talked about as a day 2, maybe even day 3 type of player, which again becomes an awful lot more palatable. It's like Trayvon Walker versus Shamar Stewart. Where you're talking about drafting them is massively relevant to how much you should like the guy. So Milroe, on day 2 or day 3, I'm all for rolling the dice and seeing if you can build something around this guy. I don't need to bring him in as the day 1 starter. I don't need to saddle the franchise to him and hope he can work out the way the Colts are suddenly in trouble because Richardson hasn't. I can bring him in as a clear backup, as a developmental 3, and see if we can make something happen. See if a couple of years working with Jordan Palmer or, my QB coach can fix some of the inconsistency it is. And if we can, the athleticism and the strength, the tools are there for him to be a starter, because I think he is mentally reasonably far along. But it's a different conversation because I'm not talking about drafting him at 5 overall.
Well, let me get a little meta on you really quick here, because this is why I say, if you're an evaluator, you don't always want to learn from your mistakes, because they're biased. If you go back and you say, I'm not going to make the Anthony Richardson mistake again. I saw the tools, bought into his upside, and that didn't work out. When the reality is, even at the time, he's a low, proposition, right? It's probably not going to hit. And he still could. He's still young. But it's probably not going to hit, right? So if at the time you throw Richardson into this high upside bucket, but it's only a 10% probability, well, that's only one data point. Milrose, a similar data point, right? You throw him into the same bucket. He's a high upside proposition. He probably won't hit either, but yeah, it's more palatable in the third round than it is in the first round.
And also with Richardson, let's bear in mind that like the Colts' biggest problem, arguably, has not necessarily been his inconsistent play. It's the fact that he's been hurt selling half of his career so far. Like at least 50% of Richardson currently being like a quote unquote bust is the fact that he's been hurt almost all the time, and they can't rely on him starting, let alone figure out how much better he can get. So even if he didn't get any better at all, it's like that's part of it. Is he going to get hurt or not? So I think it's worth rolling I don't have a ton of confidence that Jalen Milroe is going to end up being, an NFL starter or look good or develop or fix the weak elements of his game. But I'm absolutely willing to roll the dice in, the third or fourth round relative to the other quarterbacks available.
The hand size discussion, by the way, too, to me, that's a little double counting because that shows up in accuracy. That shows in his ability to grip the ball, rip it, and put it where he wants. And that potentially gets worse in bad weather. I think that is a factor, but it shows up in his accuracy. The other thing that isn't really stereotypical here, you mentioned, hey, he'll go through reads. You're right. He hits some backside reads. I think he sees the open seam route and he rips it and he does some good stuff there. I think he's very inconsistent outside of structure, right? So this reminds me of Marcus Mariota. Specifically, Mariota was a very athletic quarterback, but I don't think he had good playmaking feel outside the pocket. And I think that was one of the hindrances to Mariota. Stylistically, if he could have been, as an athletic quarterback, if he made more plays outside of structure or just made better plays, he would have been that much better. Milroe's inconsistent there, right? You'll see him make a throw, but his accuracy is bad on the run. He had play, I think it was Tennessee, where he took an intentional grounding where he kind of ran into the end zone. Like, I don't think his playmaking passing instincts are good. His playmaking running instincts are good. So passing, not good. Running is good. So that's another issue that I have with Milroe. So his accuracy is inconsistent both inside the pocket and outside, but also his decision-making outside the pocket is pretty poor. I'm going to quote, there's a Family Guy line where they make fun of Tim McCarver, former baseball announcer, and they're making fun of his ability to, I don't know, say weird stuff. But they say it's something like, as bad as the Yankees were in the first half of this game, that's how as bad as they've been now. And so that was the Tim McCarver line. That's me describing Jalen Milroe as good as he was in the first half of Georgia. That's how as bad as he's been against Tennessee. So the inconsistencies in Jalen Milroe's game, the first half of Georgia, I know our friend Dane Brugler was talking about it. That's first round tape is what he was saying live on the air. He was carrying Bama. They were up 24-0, whatever it was. It was ridiculous. Run game, throwing it, everything. But he was awful in this Tennessee game. It was like everything showed up, and there's a few other games like that too. So the inconsistency of Jalen Milroe is a massive issue, but I think you build a run game around him, pray and hope that the accuracy gets better, and that's the developmental aspect of Jalen Milroe's game. Family Guy, Tim McCarver quotes. You weren't ready for that, Sam. All right, I'll give you my number 5, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But as a former professional athlete, I care about what I put into my body, especially when it comes to protein. That's why we're so pumped to be sponsored by Orgain. Orgain believes real nutrition has the power to make a real difference in people's lives. Orgain's 30-gram complete protein shakes offer protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings without any added sugar. Plus, they're excellent sources of premium ultra-filter protein with all 9 essential amino acids. Orgain's products are handcrafted with high-quality ingredients, which makes it taste like one of the very best protein shakes I've ever had. Love the chocolate, love the vanilla, love both of them. I use it post-workout here. 30 grams of protein injected right into my body. Gotta love it. Orgain's also great on the go. Get little to-go containers. Those are easy, and they also have stuff that the entire family would love. Protein powders to bars to shakes, tons of other nutritional products. The whole family can get something from Orgain. So remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain's 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/checkthemic. Use code checkthemic for 30% off your order. It's the best offer you'll find, but you have to use the code checkthemic for 30% off. One more time, 30% off. Orgain.com/checkthemic. Use code checkthemic. All right, my QB5, as I said, I had Milrow at 6. So I've got Kyle McCord as QB5. Syracuse's
Kyle McCord is my QB6.
All right, so we're still in similar range here. I'm going Kyle McCord as QB5. A lot of interesting dynamics here because he was Ohio State's quarterback in 2023. He goes to Syracuse. Ohio State brings in Will Howard, who's obviously lower on our lists here. Will Howard leads them to a national title, but Kyle McCord ripping seam routes all over the place. He reminded me of a Norv Turner 1995 quarterback. Get this guy in a vertical passing offense, let it rip, and again, there's some issues there, right? Turnover-worthy plays, decision-making, it's in there. He's not dynamic, moving around the pocket, other than one play against BC. But he might have that high-end vertical passing potential and a pretty big arm, especially compared to others in the class.
Yeah, I thought his arm was very impressive. Like his arm jumped out to me in terms of strength relative to a lot of these other guys. And this is the point in the rankings where I reach the stage where I'm like, I don't really think that any of these guys are starters anymore. So if who's the guy that could be, right? Who's the guy that if something worked out, he's got the ability to be a starter? I'm like, well, give me the big guy with the cannon. Give me the big guy with the cannon who might theoretically end up as a starting quarterback because of that. And that's what I ended up kind of going with here. He's got, he's got that prototypical stuff, right? He's like 6'3", 220. What did he end up at?
Yeah. Now we'll talk about Quinn Ewers at some point in the show too. McCord was like the quintessential big recruit, like the big recruit that also has the big arm and some things to work out. He is the more classic big time recruit, size, arm strength, the whole deal.
Yeah. So like 6'3", 220 with a cannon for an arm now was kind of garbage at Ohio State. I mean, he was not good. Like
he wasn't. Yeah.
Visibly, it's like he's holding back the good players on this offense. And I think they were right to move away from him and go in a different direction. He was much better at Syracuse. Okay, we can talk about level of competition, et cetera, but I thought he showed significantly more. The traits are there. He does have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. Like there's a lot of mistakes in his game. I thought ball location was average at best, pretty iffy, like a high volume of just straight up misses. And Milrow had this as well. Like their negative plays are not, the turnover. Well, I mean, McCord's are as well, but it's not necessarily just the turnover-worthy mistakes, like the throwing it to the linebacker stuff. It's like you just missed an open target, like, problematic degree of inaccuracy.
Yeah, he also had our friend Pony. There was a midseason game against Pitt where McCord, Syracuse is hot, and Pony, Pittsburgh radio, comes out. He goes, he tries to play like this pessimistic game for Pittsburgh college football. He's like, watch out, Kyle McCord's coming to town, gonna rip apart Pitt. McCord goes out, throws 3 pick sixes, 5 picks overall, I think it was, on Thursday Night Football. It's just hilarious because Pony's wrong all the time, so it's funny. Hope he's listening. Talk to you tomorrow. But yeah, McCord, certainly has those games. And you're right. In 2023, it was like, all right, you're missing some key throws here. You're letting down Marvin Harrison Jr., not maximizing him. But he was better this year. And look, there's volatility to his game. I also have to be fair here as a, dome quarterback advocate for that being a big part of reasons for better stats. He's ripping the ball in these domes. He's got the carrier dome and everything. And he was a little off at Pitt, the outdoor NFL, more NFL environment there. So yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies there, but he is, I wrote down aggressive opportunity giver, right? And he just rips the ball into tight windows, and there's mixed results. That's what you get. There's a little, the way we described Aiden O'Connell these last couple of years. And once again, you have to just weigh this thing properly. I'm not saying everything's going to be great. I'm saying that there's this high-end potential of, you have a year where you have good vertical threats and you hit some good variance on the vertical threats, then you could have a high-end season there. So the difference between him and Milrow, if you're willing to build your offense around a running quarterback,
Yeah.
Milroe might be your backup. If you have a more vertical attacking offense, pocket type of offense, McCord might be your backup. And then you kind of see if everything can click.
Yeah, that's the reason I have them ranked in the order that they are, because I think that Milroe's rushing ability, Milroe's ability to make plays that are broken down, just gives you an extra level of, floor, ceiling. Both of them I think are higher in that regard. McCord is much more of a, prototypical old school pocket passer. And if that doesn't work out, it's kind of tough luck. But again, I think the physical tools are there for him to have a good season at the NFL level.
He gives pretty good back shoulder opportunities. I wrote down that he was a plodding scrambler, and then like the next play I saw on film, he did make a nice little play with his legs against Boston College. But certainly compared to these other quarterbacks, I don't think he's very mobile. Doesn't have his similar pocket mobility questions that we said about Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart. But here's the those guys, Dart and Sanders, are more take care of the ball, chuck it up to 15, 20 yards, you have success. McCord's just gonna rip it all over the field and see what happens. So that's the style quarterback that he is. Some boomer bust, big time throw, turnover worthy play, missing throws potential, but hit the high end of variance, and maybe Kyle McCord comes out of this class as, how did you miss on Kyle McCord? Plus, he's trending in the right direction. Say what you want. I'm going to say these next few quarterbacks here, they all kind of had their coaches rave about him, right? He dealt with adversity, and we've seen almost every good quarterback besides like Peyton Manning had some level of adversity that they overcame, right? He left Ohio State for good reason, as you said, went to Syracuse. Fran Brown, his head coach, is saying, this dude does everything right. He elevated our program. The next few guys that we talk about are going to have coaches going to bat for them, whatever that's worth. And I think that means a little bit of something here too, where it's easy to say, oh, he sucked at Ohio State, he was only good at Syracuse, but he's trending in the right direction, and he has these tools to work with, and has the coach's blessing, so to speak, too. So I think that means a little something.
Well, this is the more classic kind of old college career where it's like, how much do you hold against him? The fact that he quote unquote failed at the first place, right? Like that he had to go somewhere else. And like, this is back to, you remember Joe Flacco couldn't beat out Tyler Palko at Pitt, right? Had to go to Delaware, wherever it was.
Yep.
It's like, well, that's a red flag. Like, you couldn't beat out Tyler Palko. How good can he be? It's like, well, maybe he was better later on. Maybe he developed later. Maybe they were wrong, right? Like maybe he should have beaten out Tyler Palko and they just went with the wrong quarterback. Either way, I think we've sort of learned previously that that's probably not a good way of looking at college careers. Like it probably doesn't matter that the guy was worse earlier, as long as he showed you at some point that he had the high end in there and could put a season together.
All right. I hate that my number 8 is number 8, but let's go. So you have McCord as 6. Yep. I have him as 5. You have Milroe as 5. I have him as 6. So we've got the same top 6 quarterbacks. Who is QB 7 for you, Sam?
We might differ here. I have number 7, Curtis Rourke from Indiana.
Oh, Rourke, way up there at 7, huh? I don't.
Who have you got?
I have Will Howard, Ohio State. And that makes me hate, because I wanted Tyler Shuck to be higher, because I want to really like Tyler Shuck, and I feel like I got bullied into caring about his injuries and his age and all that stuff. So that'll be my giveaway. I got Howard at 7 and Shuck at 8, but we got to circle back to the Curtis Rourke discussion here.
Okay, so I have Shuck at 8, so we've got him in the same spot. But I have Curtis Rourke jumping both of them. I really like Curtis Rourke. He's the guy that I would go to bat for on day 3. Really nice touch on his passes. Like, that guy can layer the ball, feathers it in when he has the space to. Another kind of like, he's got a lot of experience, 6 years in college, 5 of them where he was 5 at Ohio State. No, where Ohio, right?
Yeah.
At Ohio, 4 of which was playing, and then this Indiana year where he was really, really good, made them into a very good team. 24 years old. Played through an ACL injury last year, like had a partially torn ACL and was playing anyway. And you could see it, like it was visibly, he would take off running and it's like the guy's limping. He's gimpy on this torn ACL. That's insane. I mean, any kind of knee ligament injury that's a thing that you're playing through, I don't know how you can play high level football with that. Now, admittedly, it's not the same as a wide receiver, right? He's not running routes and cutting on it, but like, I don't know how that doesn't affect you mentally, that you can't trust your knee, that it's like, it's bad. He's tough. He hangs in the pocket. He's got a quick delivery. I like this play a lot.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. The touch throws are fantastic. There's not a lot of QBs in this class where I'm like, hey, the touch is fantastic. I think Jackson Dart is there, Rourke is there. I don't, and part of that is sometimes you say that when the guy doesn't zip it all that well. So I don't think he's got a great arm, but he's got pretty good touch. Does a nice job there. Playing through the injury is a factor. Elevating Indiana. Kurt Cignetti, the head coach, it was funny listening to him before the season. He wasn't all that high on Curtis Rourke. Almost the way he described him was kind of like,
Right.
he was like what's left in the portal. And Cignetti's just a funny guy because he's like super honest, really kind of this brash, confident guy. Like, I'm coming to the Big Ten to beat Ohio State and everything. And he almost backed it up with a great season. They make it to the playoff. It was just funny because he's just not the toolsiest guy, but he goes out there and, makes some plays. I think Indiana's got a couple pretty good receivers, to be honest, but there was a lot of open stuff too in that offense. The middle of the field's just open all day, glances and slants. Runs the offense well. He's kind of your classic backup. And if you want to use the knee injury as like this dude's tough and that affects some of the mobility and that's going to affect some of the results there, then you can kind of talk yourself into Curtis Rourke as your backup there.
Yeah, affects the mobility. I also wonder whether it affects his arm strength. Like you've got to step into those throws, be comfortable on both your legs. Like my question, I did have some sort of arm strength questions. He throws a really weird deep ball, right? I can't remember. We've definitely talked about this before with a quarterback, and I can't remember who it is, but like he throws these dying ducks on deep balls that often end up as kind of like back shoulder, sort of 60-40 jump balls in favor of his receiver. And I don't know if it's intentional. I can't work out if he's trying to do that or if they're just dying on him.
Yeah, because we're evaluators at heart, right? We're trying to evaluate, and you normally rip a back shoulder. You don't throw an underthrown back shoulder, but sometimes you could.
Well, you don't put that level of arc on it. Like you're not throwing a rainbow back shoulder.
Right. That's what you don't throw an underthrown 30-yard pass that lands at a guy's back shoulder. Usually by design, but maybe you do. And Rourke definitely has some of those on film.
But again, like I wonder, number one, I don't even know if that's deliberate or not, or if that's just a thing that was happening. Or number two, if that was the kind of representation of a dying deep ball, like is that affected by the fact that one of his knees is being held together by a brace? Like he doesn't have full leg mobility to be able to put that torque through and really, get the full strength of his arm into it.
That certainly could be the case. The knocks on Rourke, I mean, when they went up against Ohio State, Notre Dame, the big teams, the offense kind of fell flat. So, and they also, if you're a college football fan, there was a big debate about whether Indiana should have even been in the playoff because they really didn't beat any good teams. When they ran into good teams, they did struggle. So that's why he's in backup territory. I did not have him. He'd probably QB 11 for me. He's battling 10-11 spot for me, Curtis.
Yeah, and I agree he's a backup. Like I see him as a high-end backup quarterback, but I really like a lot of his sort of traits and the way he plays. And in this world of like now we're into like long shot gambles that could start or high-end backups. So Curtis Rourke's number 7 for you. For me, it's Will Howard from Ohio State. I hated having him ahead of Shuck. We'll talk about Shuck in a minute here, but he grew on me because that's how he played this season, right? He kind of grew as a player, I thought, and then goes on this playoff run. And look, we're not talking about QB wins here necessarily, but what I liked about Will Howard, we talk about the adversity aspect of things. I thought he was very consistent at Kansas State. I thought he was going to hold back Ohio State's offense the same way Kyle McCord did. I really thought coming into the year, that was a lateral move for Ohio State. Kyle McCord is better than Will Howard. And I just ranked him higher than Will Howard, so I still kind of believe it. And Will Howard went out there and answered a lot of questions. Now, the difference, Ohio State brought back, I don't know how many players are going to get drafted, but they've got like 15 players in the day 2 mix here. This team is loaded, more loaded than they were in 2023. Then they added Jeremiah Smith, who looks like a year 5 NFL elite receiver as a freshman. So the talent was incredible on this team. But I thought Will Howard, he's got his quirks, man. I mean, he throws some hospital balls over the middle. He'll misread coverages. He's very, very high throw it over the middle. We used to talk about Cam Newton being calibrated high. Will Howard has that. He kind of throws uphill over the middle.
But I thought he fixed some of that stuff as the year went on. So he's got this development arc that is intriguing. And then the mental aspect of this, his ability to bounce back from a Michigan game, which was awful, go on this playoff run, like that means a little something. And then I think having that talent around him made him more aggressive. And he just said, let's go. Let's give these guys a chance to play. He had a nice deep ball, improved his touch on that. So I think we see this development arc of Will Howard that it makes him an intriguing backup option.
We talk all the time about human beings are like hardwired to pattern match and to see trends when trends don't necessarily exist, right? So, 4-game sample size, you're like, oh, this means, look at this, it's trending up, right? And reality, it might just be noise. So players that have that nice, neat narrative scare the crap out of me, especially when they're in small sample size. And Howard has got that. He's the one that frustrated me the most because I don't know what to do with his kind of career arc. So he got better every single year, right? Albeit, maybe incremental steps, but like got better every year, was playing his best football late in his final year and had arguably the best game of his entire college career in the national title game, right? Like if you were drawing up what you would want it to look like, that's what you would want it to look like. Got better all the way, was playing your best football at the end of your career, and then literally hit your peak for the national title game, the biggest game you've ever played, right? That's perfect.
And we talked about this with CJ Stroud a couple years ago ad nauseum, where
Right.
it wasn't just, I mean, that was like different level, his best game, but it was one game against Georgia. And the last thing we saw, and we kept saying, how much do you weigh that? With Will Howard, it's kind of a 4-game stretch in the national title game, the Oregon game and especially the Notre Dame game, where it's 3rd and 11, the season's on the line. Ohio State almost blew it, and he throws this absolute dime to Jeremiah Smith to seal the season. And there was other points during the year. Penn State, he has a bad pick 6 early in the game. He ends up being the guy that bounces back and, a couple runs to seal that game. All the way along the way, other than the Oregon game where he slid too early and, that game management wasn't great there. He bounced back from a lot of adversity, and did it in a 4-game stretch on the playoff run for Ohio State.
I mean, Chip Kelly is his coach at Ohio State. Chip Kelly is now offensive coordinator for the Raiders. I can't think of a better combination, than reuniting them in the mid rounds there and putting, excuse me, I'm like about to sneeze and trying to stave it off. Been putting Will Howard back together with Chip Kelly for the Raiders and like a mid round draft pick. We keep talking about they're not necessarily out of the quarterback market because they traded for Geno Smith. I mean, maybe they are in the first round, but what if they could come back in the mid rounds and grab Will Howard and pair him back up with his college coach who theoretically, developed him and got him playing his best football late in his final season. Like that's just a perfect match.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think, and that's another one where the coaches were saying, you can't say enough good things about Will Howard. Bouncing back from Michigan, coming into this situation, high pressure environment where this was literally national title or bust, right? You're talking about Ryan Day, his head coach, having his job on the line if they only lost 2 games or 3 games, and one of which was against Michigan, and they went on the title run. So he's a good runner, but he's also got those clunky Daniel Jones, like he tripped like Daniel Jones in the Texas game on his way to the end zone. He's a viable runner. He does get this toolsy label because he's big and can run. I think his arm's worse than Dylan Gabriel's, as I've said before. So I don't think he zips it that well, but he's got a nice deep ball. Improve the touch on that. Sometimes it's too flat. Other times he puts more air under it. So he's one of those guys that's like a lot of this is good. Yeah, but that's bad. This is good. Yeah, but that's bad. And that's a developmental type of player and trending in the right direction, as you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have him at 9. He's the next guy on my list after we both had Tyler Shough at 8.
All right, Tyler Shough.
Before we get to Tyler Shough, I have one more critical update on the Will Campbell measurement saga.
Yes, please.
So, at his pro day, Will Campbell crossed the threshold from non-viable to viable in terms of arm length, right? His arms grew, he became 33 inches, and that's left tackle viable. At the same time that happened, his wingspan got even smaller.
Come on. So now he's got like the smallest wingspan pound for pound, for his height ever we've seen.
his wingspan was already the smallest that would have ever been measured for a tackle in the NFL, and it became shorter at the exact moment his arm length became tackle viable.
Wow, that's awful. Also, while we're transitioning here, just want to tell people I'm teaching another class for SMWW, Sports Management Worldwide. Go to smww.com if you want to learn more about analytics, PFF analytics, PFF premium stats. We're using them as a foundation 8-week course. Had a lot of success with some listeners here, helping to teach and maybe place people in college, NFL, agents, whatever you're looking for to do, media. Great place to learn. smww.com. Find my name. Go check it out. All right. QB8 for both of us. Tyler Shuck from Louisville. The guy's like 37 years old, whatever. He's our age, Sam. What is he really, 26? The guy backed up Justin Herbert at Oregon. So that's the starting point here. Oregon to Texas Tech to Louisville.
He backed up. He backed up Justin Herbert at Oregon. There was so Ross Tucker was saying that he did a game. He broadcast a game where he was. Who was it? It was somebody throwing to Gabe Davis at like in 2019 or something. Like Gabe Davis, who's 5 years into his NFL career at this point. I forget who the quarterback was, but it was somebody throwing to Gabe Davis back in 2019, and Tyler Shuck was in that game.
Wild. I mean, Bo Nix' first start was against Justin Herbert. We were kind of playing that game last year.
Right.
2019. Same year. So Shuck's had one good year. I thought he showed flashes at Texas Tech. Like you saw elements of it. He's got a good arm. The age thing, and I think more than the age thing, I want to talk about that a little bit, but it's more the injury concerns. His injury, he had from 2021 to 23 at Texas Tech, played 15 games there, broke his same collarbone twice, and had a broken fibula. Right. So the injuries, just like we talked about with Michael Penix last year about like the double ACLs that Penix was dealing with. Similar story with Shuck here. I don't think the age is an issue. I'll let you comment. What do you think of him? And then we'll talk about how much you weigh the age aspect of things.
Yeah. So he's got traits, right? He's got a pretty good arm. He can really zip it in, particularly when he gets his feet under him. Now, there's a lot of plays where he doesn't like getting his feet under him. He's got this weird tendency to like try and fall away and zip it in somewhere, like almost manufacture the throw so that it's all arm and no anything else working for him. And again, this is like, I forget, I've heard people talk about how, injury breaking things is generally like, it's just an accident, right? It's not really predictable, but you can kind of influence that by the way you play the game. And he seems to manufacture more awkward hits than most quarterbacks. I also thought he had hilarious, like Peyton Manning mannerisms in terms of like ostentatious technique. Remember the way Peyton Manning would be like all over the top, like demonstrating like, flawless technique, like upright, bouncing around, like just like weirdly over the top like mechanics, right? Shuck's got some of that to him as well. It's almost like I'm specific, like, look, I'm showing on tape that this is how it's supposed to look. It's kind of funny the way he plays sometimes.
He's got some insane highlight reels rolling to his left. So I tried to highlight that on Twitter the other day. Somebody brought up the point because of his injuries, he's trying to protect the collarbone, so he actually doesn't roll right. So that's a factor. And now that knowing that in hindsight, I'm like, okay, yeah, most of his stuff is rolling left, but he's got this Notre Dame touchdown rolling to his left, which is insane. And then the one I posted was a play against Virginia rolling to his left. He lofts it over a defender, puts it right on, I think it was Ja'Cory Brooks' hands in the back of the end zone, another draftable prospect, and he drops it. He's got this highlight reel of these outside of structure plays, generally rolling left as a righty. You don't see that very often, so that's kind of intriguing. And as you mentioned, I know Greg Cosell said he's got the second best tape, I think is what he said, or maybe the best tape of anybody in the class. And like you could make that argument, right? You can make that argument. Reads it out, he's got some boneheaded, I'm just going to chuck it into double coverage plays, but he's got some anticipation plays in there. He's got some zip plays, some touch plays, in structure, out of structure. He's got like ticks every box of, did you at least see some of this to his game? But then the age question and the injury question, those are legitimate. The thing about age is I don't think it's a viable argument to say well, he's going to be too old when whatever. Like, you're only going to get 10 years out of him. That's an absurd argument. Please don't make that. Or that he'll never get better because we see players get better at this age. I think age comes in the way baseball uses it, as I always say. Analytically, you have to say this dude was 24 playing against college kids. Like, you have to weigh that when you're watching the film. Or if you're doing statistical analysis. The example I always use, Sam, I was a 24-year-old in rookie ball. And if you go look at my stats from 06, it's kind of dominant. And then you look at the age and it's like, well, yeah, Steve was 24 striking out these 18, 19-year-olds. That makes sense. So age for level of competition for statistical analysis matters. And if you're going to use that against Shuck, fair, right? It took him until he was 24, 25. I forget his exact age now. To actually have success, now. 25, right, in the ACC. That's a factor. But if you're going to be like, oh, he'll never get better, like we see players get better. We see Geno Smith get better. We see Baker Mayfield. We see Sam Darnold. Players get better at various points in their career. And we see quarterbacks play into their mid to late 30s. Age isn't a factor for that. It's a factor in saying this is a man playing against boys. You have to weigh that when you're watching the film.
Yeah, and particularly for him, where the reason he's played that long is because of injuries. Like, it's not like he couldn't have been good earlier in his career. We just, every time he got any kind of run of games, he got hurt. So it's like, was this it took you until you were 24 effectively to have a good season. Does that mean you couldn't have done it earlier if you'd stayed healthy? Like, that's the question, as opposed to this is, definitely an indication that he was only surviving, or only having a good season because he'd spent so long in college. He was an old man relative to young kids.
Yeah, so that's where I am with him. Anything else in my printed out notes here?
I felt like he was a tick slow on read sometimes, like certainly relative to those top guys that we talked about, where the processing is quick, the decision making is good. I felt like Shuck was a step behind those guys just in terms of the speed he was doing that at.
Yeah, I mean, depends on how often you see that. I saw some anticipation, some that were late. I thought, again, relative to after watching Shedeur and Dart, I thought he had better carry and better arm at the intermediate level than both of those guys. The other thing, too, he definitely has some ridiculous heaves into double coverage, but when you go back and look at the game situation, it's like 3rd and 10, and he's putting it down at the goal line. Like, there's some of them are calculated risks. I think he's got like a controlled aggression to his game that I think is pretty good. So, look, I don't think the age keeps him from being a developmental quarterback. If he was younger, he's higher on this list for me. He's probably a better, cleaner prospect than some of the other guys that we ranked higher. But the age and injury should be considered and drops him a little bit.
Right. I mean, if you take away those two things, he's higher on the list just because he's a cleaner prospect at that point. Like, you're more comfortable with obviously the injury history, and you're more comfortable that the age was not a factor in the good play that you saw from him. So yeah, agreed. It's not that it's necessarily his fault, but it's definitely relevant to how you're projecting him forward.
I'm having fun. We're a little over 2 hours in. We're just talking QBs. This is fun, man. I'm enjoying the NFL draft ranking season here.
So we got our QB 10, and then we have a sleeper each. Have you got a sleeper?
I haven't done my QB 9 yet. So I've got 2 more that we have not discussed yet.
Okay.
So who was 9 for you?
Howard.
So Will Howard was 9. For me, it's Quinn Ewers. And then we're going to have maybe similar. I don't know what we're going to have as 10. Quinn Ewers is QB 9 for me. Did he not make your top 10?
Ewers was my QB 10.
Okay, so he's 10. So we still have him to discuss, and then my 10, because this wraps up your list. 10 for me will be Riley Leonard.
Okay.
From Notre Dame, with Curtis Rourke right on the outside looking in here, I guess. Didn't love this. I think there's an argument for Ewers.
Let's do the Ewers thing then, because that's the one we both got in still.
So let's discuss him for a minute. For me, there was a point earlier in this year, Michigan game, week 2, where I thought the trajectory was on its way up. Former top recruit, had slightly gotten better every year, ran the offense well. I never thought he was a toolsy type of guy, but quick reads, making the right decision, short and intermediate accuracy, I thought was fine. I thought there was this Bo Nix-like trajectory where you saw Nix literally get better every year, and Ewers might have been on his way to do that. I think we got robbed of that because he got hurt again, and then tried to play through it, and his game was far more inconsistent, and it was never there. And look, he may have never gotten there, and injury aside, he may never have progressed. But that's what I was keeping an eye on in week 2. Is he going to be the next guy that has this Bo Nix-like trajectory and gets better every year? But then the injury part of it is part of this story, much like it is for Shuck. Ewers played through a bunch of them, but he's been hurt the better part, big parts of the last 2-3 years. So that is a factor with Quinn Ewers. And even though I think he did get better, a little bit better every year, there's still just so much inconsistency on his tape, especially the deep ball. I mean, he has had some of the best speed receivers, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, the 4.29 Matthew Golden, right? Isaiah Boyd, and we do not have consistent downfield throwing from Quinn Ewers beyond 20 yards.
Yeah, so look, I think they got that in. We talked about this at the combine, right? They got that propaganda out there that Ewers was battling an oblique injury this season, and man, if that would have kept most people out of the starting lineup at all, that he deserves huge credit for battling through that. That shut down Derek Carr this season, and instead he's out there making a go of it and not playing as well as he could because of that. I think let's say that's real, right? I have no reason to suspect that it isn't, other than it's quite a convenient story, given that he's, headed towards the draft right now. But let's say that's a reason that this season wasn't as good as previous years. I just don't ever. So number one, I think I don't understand what people are looking at when they watch Quinn Ewers tape sometimes. Like, people talk about him as this toolsy quarterback with a cannon, and I just do not see that. I do not see evidence of this strong-armed, physical traits type of quarterback. It's all marginal to me. Like, it's in the category with the other guys that we're talking about where people are bringing it up as a criticism, and yet somehow it's a strength of Quinn Ewers. I don't understand that. I don't get it. I don't know where it's coming from. Secondly, if you exclude like the injury year, the injury season, you still can't find like any PFF measurement where he doesn't grade below average. Like, everything is weak. It's 47th percentile in from a clean pocket. It's 44th percentile in terms of percentage of positively graded plays. It's 32nd percentile in terms of avoiding negatively graded plays. It's just bad. He's just not a good quarterback and never has been. And yet, because for some reason he was the best graded recruit ever, there's this lingering belief that Quinn Ewers should be good. And yet nobody can seem to find evidence of it actually being the case.
Yeah, there was, again, oblique injury. Played through it the whole year, but Ohio State game there in the playoff, he tried to, how far was that Hail Mary? He tried to throw a Hail Mary at the end of the half, barely reached the end zone. I mean, it was like 45, 50 yards. He could barely even get it there. I haven't seen a great arm either. Forgive me. Remember Luke Falk? Luke Falk, touch thrower. It's not that bad, but I'm just, like, it reminded me of like the positives for Ewers were, as he was playing the Michigan game, which will always be like the pinnacle for me watching him. I know he played against Alabama before he got hurt, 22. But touch throws, short area accuracy, I thought a lot of that was fantastic. But the arm, RPM-wise, velocity-wise, or just deep ball is an arm strength, but just deep ball consistency has never really been there, I don't think, for Quinn Ewers.
By the way, even you saw the video they posted at his pro day. Like, he did a similar throw to the classic Zach Wilson roll out to your left, fire it downfield, and like with Zach Wilson, it's like, wow, this is like mind blowing. This is why he's the top prospect. Quinn Ewers rolls out, throws the ball. It's like a 55-yard duck. It's like dying, wobbling. Looks like late era Peyton Manning. And the NFL's like official account is like, look at this ball or whatever. Texas is like, look at this. Like, it's all positive. You're like, what are you looking at? This is a negative throw. This is a bad example. Like, this is a weakness, not a strength you're posting here. I don't understand the way the Quinn Ewers thing is portrayed.
Just laughing at some people trashing my 8-year-old's mock draft right now, but it's good times. Yeah, Ewers. So yeah, he's at 9 for me. He's at 10 for you.
I wanted to get him out of the top 10. I desperately wanted to not have him in my rankings, and I couldn't find another quarterback that I was comfortable was better than him.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to see it. I really thought, I mean, this is going to sound ridiculous now because we both barely have him as a top 10 quarterback in this class. I really thought evaluators were going to be at that game in Michigan saying there's QB1 in this class. and think about what was happening earlier this season. Cam Ward wasn't really a thing yet. He was just this high upside, had one good game against Florida. We think it could be there, but he hadn't done it yet. Shedeur, again, he's not the toolsiest guy. He's not going to be a slam dunk to go number 1 overall. So at the time, I thought somebody's going to think Quinn Ewers is QB1 in this wide open draft class. And here he is, coming off of a not so great season with, man, the more I watched that Texas offense over the last few years with Sark, some good playmakers, man. They had Sark dialing it up, some of the best athletes in the nation, and we saw, pretty good production, not great from Quinn Ewers there. QB 10 for me, you didn't have him in the top 10. I'll just talk about him quickly, though. Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. And every single one of these quarterbacks, Sam,
he was 11.
At some point, he's 11 for you. So we have the same top 11.
Yeah.
Every single person from Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard, scouts like this guy, right? Yeah, this is the guy scouts are going to love. And we still don't know if someone's going to love Riley Leonard in round 3. Yeah, so we don't know. Riley Leonard, Quinn Ewers, like somebody might. But Leonard, to me, was always a potential play. Coming out of Duke, he's an excellent runner. The very first drive against Ohio State last year, the dude's just like willing Notre Dame. Like he's like, looks like he's ready. Didn't he throw up on the sideline? I mean, the guy was like running like crazy every 3rd and 4th down, converting, just trying to game manage and keep the ball away from Ohio State. I hate saying it, but he's got the grit factor, Sam. Like you could build a run game around Riley Leonard, I think, more than you could build it around someone else. I just don't like anything he does pass game wise, timing or accuracy, anything beyond 10 yards. And so, that's why he's a fringe top 10 quarterback in this class.
I really want to I do like Riley Leonard. Like, I like him as a person. I wanted to kind of like him. I specifically wanted to put him above Quinn Ewers because I really don't think I've never seen it with Quinn Ewers. And I just don't understand the hype around him. And I was like, I want to get him outside of my top 10. Riley Leonard's the next man up. And then I'm like, look, there's the stuff to like. He's a powerful runner. He seems like a great guy, for whatever that's worth. He's got some physical tools. Like, I think his arm's solid. And then I was like, but unfortunately, he just isn't good. That's really the fatal flaw here, is that he projects below average basically everywhere. His play under pressure is atrocious. It's like 22nd percentile at PFF. I wrote down the note that was on his first touchdown. His first touchdown pass, to be fair. He'd had a bunch of rushing touchdowns by that point. But when he scored his first touchdown pass at Notre Dame, the line of commentary for that play was, and finally, Riley Leonard has a touchdown pass in a Notre Dame uniform. I'm like, that's not a good line to have.
It was all on the ground. Yeah,
it was in his 4th game. Like, it took him till his 4th game to register a touchdown pass for a team like Notre Dame. Now, again, to be fair, he had 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns by that point. But still, when you're talking about like quarterback at the next level, you don't want the guy to have taken a month before he'd actually recorded a passing touchdown in college.
That was what was so interesting about the national championship being Will Howard versus Riley Leonard. They were both these big, can run, theoretically toolsy quarterbacks who have some just general passing flaws. Will Howard, I think, cleaned up more of them than Riley Leonard has at this point. But accuracy, timing issues. I wrote down in my notes for Leonard, everything beyond 10 yards just felt like a chore. Timing, accuracy, like all of it, right? Just timing, accuracy, footwork, inconsistency. So he just hasn't developed as a passer. And the reason why you hear hype for these players is because they do have some tools. But you're saying this 2 years ago, like you hear this at Duke a couple of years ago, it was like a what if. If he does improve some of these things, then he becomes a prospect. And I don't think we saw enough of that. But yeah, he helped elevate this Notre Dame squad the same way Will Howard helped elevate his Ohio State team. So there's something there, but still not enough as far as the development of the pass game for me.
I do think he'd be a really interesting developmental backup guy, though. Like, his running ability is good enough that, like, if you needed him, he might be able to get you through a couple of games and then figure out, how much better can he get as a passer. And, I thought some of the stuff, was it the Senior Bowl he was at? I forget which bowl game, but like, I thought some of that stuff looked pretty good. I'm not, again, he's ranked 11th on my list. It's not like I like Riley Leonard relative to anybody else in this draft class, but like, if a team drafted him in day 3 sometime late on, like, as a developmental backup, I think he's intriguing because he does have tools. It's just that he's He's been pretty bad at the position for the majority of his career.
So that's it, man. I think couple Max Brosmer from Minnesota has some people that like him. Seth Hennigan from Memphis went to the Senior Bowl. I thought he was lacking in arm strength. You got Canada, the Canada kid that went to the Senior Bowl. The one name I wanted to mention, though, that I think is just going to stick around the league is Florida's Graham Mertz. And as a Florida fan, he's this like high completion percentage guy. You know,
Chris Sims really likes him, I think.
Does he? Mertz is the guy, but he's got the high sack rate. Like he just doesn't elevate the offense, but at times, he shows some flashes and he completes a high percentage of passes. I feel like we're going to be watching Graham Mertz in the second half of preseason games for the next 10 years. So that's my Graham Mertz take. He's sticking around. He's going to be in the NFL. He's going to be around. He's going to be the John Wolford starting a preseason game again in week 3. And he's going to be around. So keep an eye on Graham Mertz. That's that guy for me. Watch him become the next Brock Purdy. I don't even know what that is. I just think we're going to keep watching him.
Yeah,
we're going to keep. Well, we need.
So let's call him your sleeper, just because
Graham Mertz is my deep sleeper. Do you have a deep sleeper? I didn't know you had one. Sorry.
My sleeper is Brady Cook from Missouri.
Oh, jeez.
Pretty crazy athlete. Like that guy ran a 4.6 again with an elite 10-yard split, broad vert, like shuttle time. Everything athletically was really good. He's got a nice, I think, compact delivery. Arms only okay. Like it's not, again, it's sort of in that category of like, don't really care about it. He does make some mistakes. Like I think is a little struggles with like post snap rotations. Like when the shell changes, I think he can be surprised a lot. And that's not great at the NFL level, but that's becoming a bigger and bigger thing than it ever has before. He throws the ball into danger a lot because he's like surprised that there's a guy there. But again, like when you're talking about backup quarterbacks with athletic upside that can carry you for a little bit, I like the tools that Brady Cook brings to the table. And I'd be willing to look at him in day 3.
I think every time I was watching the Missouri tackle Membu or whoever else or Luther Bird, every single time it's like Brady Cook's rolling to his right and chucking it into like coverage 40, 50 yards down the field. Sometimes it worked. It was great.
Yeah.
It's a good experience. Man, this was fun. It's not the best draft class in the world, but there are enough intriguing, fun to discuss players that it took us 2.5 hours to get through it. So,
yeah, and like we said with Renner, like I don't think it's a bad draft class. Like there have been draft classes in the last few years where we've got like 5 quarterbacks deep, and you're like, I am not interested in anybody else from here on in. Like they're just players that I need to talk about because they're there. I actually like every one of these guys, with the exception of Quinn Ewers. I have some intrigue in as a prospect, whether or not, like, regardless of sort of how high I rank them, like everybody in the top 10 and then a couple players after, there's at least something that intrigues me about them. And then there's Quinn Ewers that I just don't see.
So that was fun. There's at least 9 guys that you're interested in and a sleeper. So there we go. It's our QB top 10s. Let us know what your top 10 is in the description below. And like I said before, go to SMWW if you want to learn football analytics from me, smww.com. Tomorrow we got wide receivers, Sam. A lot more players to get through. We'll do a top 10. We'll give our sleepers. We'll do the whole thing.
That's where our lists are going to deviate.
Yeah, it'll be much different. We'll see what the format looks like for tomorrow with different lists. Anything else?
Nope.
So quick? All right. We appreciate everybody. We'll be back again tomorrow. See you tomorrow. More Check the Mic, 10:30 a.m. Eastern.